Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Scion Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What if Deku had fiery sentient quirk? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. 3 years ago, the world was shocked, and Japan was shaken as the news broke that All Might, the symbol of peace and a deterrent against villains, had met his match. A man with snow-white hair and cruel red eyes emerged from the destruction of downtown Sapporo. The two titans of power traded blows, and as All Might was severely wounded, hope seemed to be lost. Japan braced for the death of their symbol, but it never came. Help in the form of two local heroes who shared the name Deku sprung forth and gave All Might a moment, and a moment was all he needed to end the fight. The villain was dead, but All Might's wounds were too much, and he was forced to retire. All Might and the heroes Deku disappeared, and with their disappearance, the truth came out. The cruel man was All for One, the oldest villain in the world, the emperor of the underworld, and a man with many devout followers. Rumors spread that All for One supporters had kidnapped the heroes, while others assumed they went into protective custody. Some less reputable sources were convinced that it was all a conspiracy and that the three heroes and, in fact, All for One himself were all in a secret Antarctic prison. Whether those ideas hold any real weight is debatable at best, but what is true is that 3 years later, Japan's crime rate was continuing to rise, and organized crime had returned to the island nation. Though Japan is not where this story begins. In the middle of the northwestern state of Washington in the United States of America, a Japanese family milled about in a small town they had moved to 3 years ago. Inko Akatani hummed a soft tune her mother used to sing as she cleaned up the dishes from this week's meal prep. The little one-story house they had gotten served the family of 3 well. The community of the small town welcomed them, and they integrated nicely. Every day held a quiet sort of peace that put Inko at ease. Inko dried her hands and took 2 steps out of the kitchen and into the living room when the front door exploded inward. Inko's hand shot back, and a knife from the kitchen flew toward her. As she caught the knife, she saw her husband Hisashi on his back, kicking a man off him before blowing a gout of fire through the front door. "Hisashi, what's happening?" Inko shouted as her husband got to his feet. "Go get Mikumo and run. You know where to go," Hisashi said as several men in dark clothes ran inside, and Hisashi intercepted them. Inko threw her knife, landing in the chest of one of the attackers before they could get the drop on her husband before running down the hall towards her son's bedroom. Inko opened the door as she yelled, "Mikumo!" Inko's heart sank as she watched purple mist swirl as a hand reached out and pulled her son into the darkness before she could even think of reaching out for him. The last thing she saw was the fear in her son's green eyes. Inko's legs shook, and she fell to her knees as she stared at where her son had been. A bang echoed out through the house, causing Inko to flinch. The sound was shortly followed by the sound of her husband roaring and the ambient temperature in the house rising. Inko shot up to her feet and ran towards the living room. As she entered, another devastating blow was delivered to her heart. Her husband, the love of her life, and the other half of Deku lay on the ground, his back against the couch while his hand pressed weakly against his chest. Inko ran past the dead bodies and pressed her hands hard against the gunshot wound. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked around frantically, making sure no one was left standing and hoping that some miracle would make itself known and save her husband. Inko. Where's Mikumo?" He's fine," Inko said quickly as she watched the blood seep between her fingers. "He's okay. And you'll be okay too, sweetie, just hold on, okay? I got you. Gee good. I'm glad he's safe," Hisashi said quietly as he took his wife's hands. "Move. Take Mikumo and find Toshinori. Keep each other safe. I am sorry I won't be with you, but I believe in you. You're an amazing woman, so be strong." Inko stared at her husband as life left his eyes. Hisashi? Hey, come on, it's okay, you'll be okay, but I need you to wake up. See, come on, sweetie, keep talking." Inko squeezed her husband's hand as tears welled up in her eyes. As a sob racked her body, she curled in on herself and rested her forehead on Hisashi's chest. She wasn't sure how she stayed like that, but eventually, the tears stopped, and Inko stood. As her body moved on autopilot, cleaning herself up and grabbing the things she would need, Inko thought of a plan. She would need to find Toshinori. The man had more resources than her, and she was pretty sure he was in danger as well. These people, whoever they were, found them. It was only a matter of time before they found Toshinori. There were a handful of people in Japan who knew where the Akatani family was, which meant someone either sold them out or got captured and talked. Inko grit her teeth as she grabbed the go bags Hisashi and she had prepared. She was going to get to the bottom of this, and she was going to find her son. Inko finished packing the SUV with as much as she could as quickly as she could and headed out towards where Toshinori may be. Mikumo screamed as he was pulled through a purple mist and appeared in a sterile, cold room. A man made of mist wearing a suit stood next to him while off on the other side of the room, a portly doctor and a slim man in a suit talked quietly. The mist man held a finger up to where his mouth probably was as he looked at the trembling Mikumo. "See, I told you. The Akatani family was in Washington, and you got another kid for your experiments. Now, pay me what you promised." The doctor chuckled. "Of course. Kurogyri, if you'll give this man his reward." Kurogyri nodded, and Mikumo held back a scream as a hand shot from the portal Kurogyri had opened and grabbed the man's face. The man screamed and crumbled to ash within seconds. The doctor laughed again before saying, "Please send the newest subject to processing." Kurogyri nodded again, and Mikumo yelped as he teleported again and dropped onto an examination bed. Mikumo pulled his legs up and backed as far away from the two women who stepped into the room. Where am I? Where's my mama and papa? Both women were dressed in purple scrubs and wore white surgical masks. The one on the left had red eyes, while the one on the right had blue eyes. Red Eyes looked at the other woman and said in what Mikumo understood as Japanese, "Does the doc just not sedate these kids anymore? Why is he awake?" Blue Eyes sighed and shook her head as she dug around a drawer. "I don't know. The man is old and more concerned with experiments than processing new subjects. Hold him down for me." Mikumo screamed as Red Eyes grabbed his arm and forced it to lay flat on the bed while holding him down with a surprising amount of strength for her slim build. Blue Eyes came over with a needle in hand and performed an injection. As Mikumo's mind started to grow foggy, Blue Eyes put the needle down and said, "All right, let's see what your quirk is." Mikumo watched as her eyes glowed, and the palm of her hand started to glow a soft blue. Blue Eyes touched Mikumo's forehead and hummed. He's not quirkless, but it hasn't manifested yet. Could make for some good results." "He's what, 5 or 6? Why hasn't it come in yet?" Red Eyes asked. If I know. Come on now, let's get him into the scrubs and toss him with the others." As Red Eyes picked up Mikumo, the young boy slipped into a dreamless sleep while desperately wondering where his partners had gone. Mikumo blinked as consciousness found him again. He stared up at an unfamiliar gray ceiling. He could hear people murmuring and wondered if the Jeffersons were over again or was he visiting them with his parents. Mikumo blinked again as he thought about his parents and remembered seeing his mom before suddenly getting taken away. Mikumo sat up suddenly as fear overwhelmed him. "Mom! Hey, it's okay," a young voice said in Japanese. Mikumo looked around and came face to face with a blonde girl with yellow cat eyes. She smiled, showing off a pair of fangs. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe right now." Mikumo looked around the dull gray room. It was twice as large as his bedroom back home, and there were a dozen or so kids all wearing the same gray scrubs as him. Mikumo switched to Japanese as he asked, "Where am I? Where are my mama and papa?" His parents had been teaching him both Japanese and English. He never knew why, but if everyone here was going to speak Japanese here, then he guessed it was useful. "It's okay," the blonde girl said. "You're well, you got taken by some bad guys, but if we just do what they say, then we'll be okay." Mikumo looked at the girl. Her eyes were full of worry, which did little to help him feel better. Who are you?" "I'm Tori. I'm 7 years old, and I've been here for 3 years. I'm the oldest one here," Tori said as she did her best to smile. She needed to make sure he calmed down and didn't cry too loudly. If he did, the guards would come in and hurt them. "I am Mikumo. It's nice to meet you. Just keep calm, and it'll be okay. Crying isn't gonna help anyone," Tori said as she did her best to look determined. Mikumo nodded, and Tori smiled again, showing off her fangs. "Good, now let's go over some rules. These are really important if you want to be okay here." Mikumo glanced at the other kids, who were all sitting in little groups and occasionally looking at him. "Don't worry about the others, they're okay." Mikumo's attention went back to Tori as she scooted a little closer. "We just don't get new kids very often. Usually, more kids leave than come back." Where do they go?" "Don't know. They leave and don't come back sometimes," Tori said as she shrugged. "Anyways, about the rules. The first one is to always do what the adults tell you, no matter how scary. If you don't, then they get mad, and when they get mad, you're gonna get hurt." Mikumo nodded as the bubble of fear in his chest started to grow. Tori was doing her best to look like a confident young girl, but it was mostly just desperation to keep anyone else from suffering too much. Second rule: we share. There's not a lot to go around, so we gotta share. If someone has a hard day, we make sure they get a bit extra during meals. Selfishness is bad. And my mama told me being selfish wasn't good. Sounds like a good mama, Tori said as she giggled a little. Third rule is we don't tell on each other. Sometimes one of us will do something we're not supposed to do. It doesn't matter what the adults offer, you can't trust them. They won't give you what you want. You understand? Mikumo nodded again and said. Why yeah, do what the adults say, share, and don't tell on each other. But what if the adults tell you to tell on the others? Third rule wins, Tori said. We gotta look out for each other, so do what adults say as long as it doesn't involve you telling on the others. As Mikumo was about to nod again and tell her he understood, the door slid open, and a tall man in blue scrubs and a surgical mask walked in and said, 12, 18, 19, you three come with me. Mikumo watched as 3 boys stood up and followed the man out of the room. Why are they numbers? It's on your uniform. Your number is on your clothes. Looks like you're number 9. Tori said as she poked the number stitched into his shirt. Mikumo looked around and noted there were some large and small gaps between numbers. How? Why am I 9? You ask some weird questions, Tori said. As for the numbers, I don't know, sometimes different kids were the same numbers as kids who used to be here. Never thought about why. Oh. Mikumo muttered as he pulled his knees up to his chin. I'm hungry. We get food at set times. Bathrooms are through that door over there. Tori said as she slid up next to him and warped her arm around him now that he didn't look so close to panicking. It'll be okay, Mikumo. I promise we'll all do our best. Mikumo stayed quiet as he watched another group of kids get taken. He hoped his mama and papa would find him soon. He didn't want to stay here. The days blurred together for Mikumo as he adjusted to his new normal. The adults hadn't called on him yet, so he sat in the gray room watching men coming in and taking others. At some point, 18 and 19 didn't come back, but a new kid came in a week later, and she wore 18 scrubs. The door opened, and another man in scrubs stepped in and said, 18 and 9, come with me. Mikumo stood up and looked at Tori, who did her best to smile. Ever since getting here, she had spoken to him the most and done a lot to help him calm down. Mikumo did his best to smile back at her before following the man out of the room. The halls were all the same monotone gray, and Mikumo had no idea where he was as they turned various corners. The man stopped in front of a steel door that slid open after a moment. Sit in the chair. Mikumo walked up to the chair and eyed it suspiciously. There were weird bits on the armrest and where his legs would be. What dash? Hurry up and sit down. You're taking too long, the man said as he walked over to a table and picked up a tablet. Mikumo quickly scrambled up into the chair and yelped as the bits of metal he had been eyeing before clamped shut around his limbs and tightened themselves. They dug into his skin a bit as he squirmed. This is uncomfortable. Please stay quiet. The man said as he walked behind the chair and pulled out various cables. Mikumo tried not to squirm as the man stuck the sticky end of the wires to him in various places on his torso, arms, and legs. As the man worked, Red Eyes walked in and asked, "How's it going?" "The nodes are in place. I was just finishing up with the sensors, ma'am." "Good. Garaki is curious about this one. If 9 shows promise, the doctor may get involved." "Oof, I almost feel bad for the kid," the man muttered. Mikumo watched with growing concern as the man tapped away at his laptop while Red Eyes stared at him. As Mikumo opened his mouth to speak, he felt a tingle all over his body and then suddenly pain. Tori held Mikumo as he sobbed and trembled. The rest of the kids sat between them and the door as they compiled their dinners and portioned them out so those who had tests would get a little more. Everyone left Mikumo for Tori to care for. The boy had grown attached to her over the few days he had been here like most of them tended to do. "Shoo, it's okay. I promise it'll be okay," Tori said as she rubbed a hand through Mikumo's fluffy green hair. "You'll be okay." "Why did that do that?" Mikumo sobbed as he held on to Tori. His whole body was tingling, and his muscles twitched against his will. He could still smell and taste that scent of burnt plastic. I behaved. The adults are running tests. Something to do with quirks," Tori said as she continued to comfort Mikumo. "All of us got taken before our quirks came in. I figured out that they're trying to make us develop quirks, and then they want to try and change them or something I don't know." Mikumo sobbed and said, "I hope my quirk comes in soon. I don't want to get hurt anymore." "Yeah, none of us do," Tori said as she smiled at 3. The young boy smiled and set down the trays of food for Tori and Mikumo, the latter of which had an extra portion added on top. "Come on, Mikumo, let's eat and rest up." Mikumo sniffled and sat up after a few minutes. He slowly picked at his food while listening to the other kids. They played a game most of the time where they made up a world and would talk about all the things they'd do if they had been born there. As he ate, Mikumo only thought about going back to his parents and hugging them until this all felt like a bad dream. "It's been half a year since 9 came to us, right?" Blue Eyes asked as she tapped away at her keyboard and glanced at the boy in question, who was inside a glass pod lying on his back while tied down. Red Eyes nodded as she double-checked the machines around and connected to the pod. Guess he's gonna be a bust, though. Don't think any of them have survived this thing before. Maybe we'll get lucky. Blue Eyes said as she got up. Alright, get back over here. It's time to start. Red Eyes retreated to her companion and slid the door shut. The thick walls and glass were locked in place. Radiation security measures in place. Start it up. Blue Eyes picked up the tablet and tapped away. Here we go. Hopefully, they can find a replacement. I think we're down to 6 kids. Hopefully. Honestly surprised by how long that Blondie has survived. Is she still being starved of blood? Yeah. Blue Eyes said as the glass pod Mikumo was in started to glow with a yellow light. Mikumo screamed as he thrashed as hard as he could. His skin felt like it was on fire. He wanted to go home, he wanted to wake up in his bed and go have breakfast with his mom and dad. He wanted to be safe and to go to school with his friends and play in the woods and... I'll keep you safe. A voice cut through the pain and agony. It didn't come from outside but from inside Mikumo's mind. A sweet and kind feminine voice called out. I'll keep you safe no matter what. I'll do everything in my power to make sure you are safe, my sweet host, and I will protect those you love. Tori was pressed into the corner as the others stayed far away. Her head was pounding, and her mind was screaming at her to rush over and bite into one of the other kids. When they forced her quirk to manifest, she had developed a minor craving for blood until they started starving her of blood. Every day that went by, it got worse and worse. She felt like she was going to snap soon. The building shook, but Tori didn't pull her head out of her hands. Nothing mattered other than keeping her mind in one piece. As the lights flickered, the others screamed and scrambled away from the door just moments before it exploded. The kids screamed, and Tori curled into a tighter ball as the yellow flames washed over them. A warm comfort that few noticed washed over them as the walls crumbled and the ceiling was pushed away. Alarms blared, and as the fire reached the city above it, the children ran, but the fire held one back, not that she was in much of a state to run. Tori looked up as a thud landed in front of her, and a female voice spoke. Tori, drink from this. She was bad, so it's okay if you take her blood. Tori looked up at the corpse of Red Eyes. The fire swirled and said. They were mean to Mikumo, so I got rid of her and the other one. Mikumo wants you to be safe, so drink. Tori's mouth watered as she saw the blood trickling from the wound on the woman's head. Her desire won out, and she lunged onto the corpse and sank her teeth into Red Eye's neck. As Tori drank, the pounding in her head subsided as the fire shrank back. As her senses came back to her, Tori saw something extraordinary. The fire shrank back and deposited an unconscious Mikumo on the ground. Tori let out a soft, "Wow, so pretty." The fire flickered as it solidified into a shape resembling a female version of Mikumo. The fire smiled and said, "Thanks. I am so tired. Please, Tori. Keep him safe until I have the energy to protect him. He cares about you, so please." I will, Tori said as blood dripped from her mouth. She snapped around as a sound caught her attention. Ainen, are you done yet? Mimiko called out as she grabbed her coat. Yeah, I just finished up, Ainen said as she put away the last of the dresses. Her silver eyes scanned the various garments as her hand softly brushed against them. Tomorrow's shoot is gonna go great. And we finally get to be part of it, a young blonde woman said as she came up and threw her arm around her friend's shoulders. It'll be the debut of Mimiko Hebata, aka Uwabami, and Ainen Kuroz, aka 13, both heroines and future fashion icons. Ainen shrugged her friend's arm off and said, I told you already I'm not putting my hero name on it, Mimiko. I don't want Ainen and 13 to be known as the same person. Mimiko pouted, and her snakes all flicked their tongues. I don't get why but fine, it'll be Uwabami and Ainen then. Thank you, Ainen said as they left the studio and locked up. It had been a rough few years for the two rising heroes. They were rescue heroes, which already put them lower on the popularity polls than the heroes who fought villains. Mimiko's quirk wasn't very interesting among civilians despite how useful it was to search and rescue operations, and Ainen's hero costume wasn't very CC, so both women suffered lower ratings among rescue heroes. They were also very new to this. Mimiko had graduated from Shinkatsu 6 years ago, while Ainen graduated from UA 5 years ago. They had both realized that at the point they were at right now, being just a hero was not sustainable, and so the two beautiful women who had always loved fashion found themselves becoming models for a new magazine that was quickly gaining traction. As the two women walked down the street and chatted about the various hero news and fashion world drama they had heard, their talk stopped, and they came to a stop as the ground shook and an explosion rang out. The two heroes looked up and saw smoke rising from a few blocks away. They shared a look before booking towards the disaster. As the heroes rounded the corner, they saw the fire pulling in on itself before completely receding into a young boy who lay unconscious on the ground. Next to him, a woman was bleeding as a young blonde girl sat by them. The girl's head snapped around as they approached. The two pros sced in a breath seeing the blood staining her face and mouth. As they got closer, they saw the bite mark on the woman's neck. Uwabami put her hands up as her sneaks pointed themselves in different directions and flicked their tongues as they tried to sense if anyone else was nearby. Hello. It's okay, we may not be in costume, but the two of us are heroes. The girl was tense, and her cat-like eyes darted from woman to woman as they got closer. 13 pulled her phone out while keeping her eyes on the girl and requested EMS and police over the hero net. As they waited, 13 knelt, and her breath caught as she saw the boy. Gee girl. What is your name? I'm Tori, Tori said as she sat between 13 and Mikumo. Her head felt weird now that she had blood. I need to protect. 13 lunged forward and caught the girl as she slumped over. Uwabami looked over from the hole in the road that was near the kids. Is she okay? Yes, I think she fainted. She doesn't seem to be injured. 13 said as she laid Tori down and moved to the woman. The woman. She's dead. The boy, he's breathing. Oh my god, he's still breathing. 13 pulled her jacket off quickly and wrapped the boy's arm. The wound is cauterized, and his pulse feels steady. Emergency services will be here soon, Uwabami said as she looked at the hole. True to her word, the emergency services arrived, and the two children and the body of the woman were all taken to the nearest hospital. As the duo of heroes gave their statements, more heroes arrived and started to move into the hole to inspect what had happened. As the heroes and police got to work, Detective Tsukachi approached 13 and Uwabami. Are you two the ones who first arrive? Yes, I'm 13, and this is Uwabami. Apologies for not being in costume, but we weren't on the job at the time. It's quite alright, Naomasa said as he looked at the hole in the road. I'd like you two to accompany me to the hospital. When the children wake up, having even slightly familiar faces around may put them at ease. Makes sense, Uwabami said as the trio headed for the detective's car. Have the others reported back what's in that hole? Seems to be some kind of facility. We're not sure who was in there, and things are apparently pretty trashed, so it'll take time to figure out what was going on, Naomasa said. In the meantime, let's make sure those kids are okay and hopefully get some answers. Mikumo stirred as he blinked slowly and stared up at an unfamiliar ceiling. He groaned as he sat up. His whole body hurt, and he wasn't sure why. Mikumo raised his arm to rub his face but stopped when something felt wrong. He looked down at his right arm and saw that it didn't look like it should have. His left arm went from shoulder to fingers, but his right stopped just before the elbow. That didn't make sense. The last time he saw his arm, it was a whole arm. Why was it missing now? What happened to him? He couldn't remember. Are you awake? Mikumo jumped and looked up at the silver-haired woman sitting in the seat between himself and Tori, who was asleep. Who are you? I'm 13, a hero. 13 said as she stood. My friend and I found you outside along with Tori. Is Tori okay? Yeah, she'll be okay. 13 said as she knelt by Mikumo. You're safe now, okay. I need to step out and get a nurse. After they look you over, a policeman is going to come in and ask you questions about what happened to you. I need you to tell him everything you can, okay? Why you're a hero, right? US stop bad guys. 13 nodded. Yes, that's what heroes do, and I am one of them. Oh okay. I'll trust you because my mama and papa always said to trust heroes. 13 smiled. Sounds like you've got a good mama and papa. Mikumo nodded and smiled. Yeah, I really miss them. Well, 13 said as she stood up. I'm sure the police will do everything they can to help reunite you. Now I'm gonna go get that nurse. You stay in bed and rest, okay? Mikumo nodded and watched her leave before letting his eyes drift down to the stub of his right arm. Maybe a doctor or someone would have a cool quirk that could fix his arm. He wasn't able to think about it for very long as a couple nurses rushed in, followed by a doctor and 13. Mikumo wasn't sure what the nurses and doctor did other than poke him and ask if he was okay. But they seemed satisfied and left as a man with a cat head came in and meowed. Hello, my name is Officer Sansa. It's nice to meet you. Mikumo's eyes widened as the cat man approached. Hi. Before Sansa could proceed with his questions, Tori stirred and woke up. The girl looked around and flinched when she saw 13 and Sansa, but the moment her eyes landed on Mikumo, she lunged over to him. Mikumo! Tori! 13 sighed and looked at Sansa. Let's give them some time to calm down. The catman nodded, and the two stepped back as the kids hugged. When Tori saw Mikumo's arm, she started to panic, but 13 was quick to step in and help calm the girl down. Once the kids were no longer freaking out, Sansa stepped up and questioned them about the facility the police and heroes were currently investigating. The kids didn't know much, and things became more concerning when the kids talked about the experiments. Once the questions were done, the two kids quickly fell asleep. Sansa and 13 left them to rest while they went and spoke to Uwabami and Naomasa, who were going over the intel that the police and heroes were sent about the underground facility. Naomasa looked up as he asked, "How are they? Did they respond to your questions?" Sansa nodded and flipped open his notepad. Tori Yukio, 7 years old, doesn't remember where she was born or her parents' names. Her quirk allows her to copy someone's clothes and all after drinking their blood. She also claims to have a need to consume blood regularly. Mikumo Akatani is 6 years old and from Washington State in the United States of America. His parents are Inko and Hisashi Akatani. He said he doesn't have a quirk yet. It's going to be tough to find either of their families. Naomasa clicked his tongue as he stood up. Yeah, it will be. In the meantime, we need to put them in protective custody. 13 and I can do that, Uwabami said, surprising her friend. The detective turned to look at her as he asked, "Are you sure? You two are relatively new to being heroes, right? That's why it's a good idea. We're both unknown, so nobody will notice. We also already know the kids, so it'll be easier for them to trust us." Naomasa looked at 13. "Are you okay with this?" 13 looked at the detective and then at Uwabami before sighing. "Yeah, I'm okay with it. Uwabami makes a good point, and we have the time. All right. We'll run you through what you'll need to know and get them set up with new identities." Naomasa said, "Once they're released, we can set you up in a new place." "We live in the same complex," Uwabami said. "It's a hero complex, so the security is tight. It should be okay for us to use it." "That makes things easier for us," Naomasa said. "Now, was there anything they could tell us about the facility?" Sansa looked ill while 13 scowled and said, "It was a quirk experimentation site. They were torturing kids to try and trigger their quirks." Naomasa grimaced as Uwabami looked like she was going to be sick. Naomasa clenched his fist as he said, "Nine's Legion. The villain group?" 13 asked as the detective sat and rubbed his eyes. "I didn't think they had the resources for this kind of thing. The commission may have underestimated their resources. Either way, we will have to add this possibility to the report. In the meantime, I'll get to work on the paperwork for the kids." Mikumo frowned the next day when he looked at his arm and saw that it was still missing. As Tori stirred and woke up, Sansa entered with Uwabami and 13. Uwabami smiled as she set down 2 trays on the tables by the bed the kids had fallen asleep in. "Here you go, a nice breakfast. You need your strength if you're gonna get better quickly." The kids hesitated for only a moment before digging into the hospital food. It was moderately better than the facility's food, and when they finished up, 13 took their trays, as Uwabami said. "Tori, Mikumo, we have some news for you." The 2 kids tensed as Uwabami sat near them. "The police and heroes are going to be working really hard to find your families and get you back to them, but in the meantime, you're gonna need to hide. Which means you'll need to use different names and play pretend so the bad guys can't find you. Can we stay together?" Tori asked as she held onto Mikumo's shirt. "I promised to keep him safe until his quirk wakes up." "Quirk?" Uwabami asked. "You promised his quirk?" "I don't have a quirk, though," Mikumo said. At that moment, everyone felt the temperature rise as yellow and orange flames suddenly burst from Mikumo's back. The heroes and police tensed as they watched the fire solidify into a female version of Mikumo. "Yes, you do, silly host, it's me. I'm sorry it took me so long to come back. I was resting." Mikumo stared at the flaming vestige coming out of his back for a moment before screaming, "Ahhhhh, I'm on fire." "No, you aren't, dummy," the flame said as she grabbed his wrist to stop his flailing. "I'm your quirk, you silly boy." "It's a sentient quirk," Sansa said. "Those are exceedingly rare." Wow. That's so cool. Tori said as she watched the quirk's body flicker and wave like a campfire. "Why, you're my quirk? What's your name?" Mikumo asked as he stared into the eyes of his flaming quirk. "Yes, I am, but I don't know. It seems like you're getting a new name, so why don't you give me one after you get one?" "Oh okay," Mikumo said as he watched her shrink back and rest her head on his shoulder. "I hope we can get along." The quirk smiled as she said, "We will because I'm gonna do everything in my power to keep you safe." "Well, I hope you won't have to do too much," Naomasa said as he approached. "For now, let me tell you your new names. Tori Yukio, you will need to go by Himiko Toga for now. You'll be living with Uwabami. Mikumo Akatani, you will go by Izuku Midoriya from now on, and you'll live with 13. Don't worry though, they live in the same apartment complex, so you won't be separated." The kids released each other, and Tori said, "I'm Himiko Toga now. I kind of like that name." And I'm Izuku Midoriya. Mikumo said. That sounds cool. I like it. Izuku's quirk hugged him from behind as she grinned. It's nice to meet you, Izuku. Himiko and Izuku chuckled as his quirk rubbed its cheek against him and said. Izuku, my host is called Izuku. My lord, Garaki said as he bowed his head and entered the dark subterranean room. I have some bad news. We lost a quirk research facility. Luckily it was a smaller site, and we managed to send the data, so we did not lose any research information. I see. Nine said slowly as the black life support suit he wore hissed and injected a dose of medication. Was there anything promising there? Did the test subjects survive? No, sir. No quirks that could save you from your current predicament. As for the subjects, it seems they all escaped. And what of Tamura? Is he still causing problems? Garaki sighed. It appears that he has had enough. He left along with Kurogyri and a dozen or so men. No one of notable strength but traitors nonetheless. Garaki tapped away at his tablet as he kept talking. We knew this was coming though the boy was all for one's heir. There was no way he would sit around while someone else took the throne. He was indeed the heir. It makes me wonder why you didn't go with him. Should you not have loyalty to the boy? I care only about my research. All for One supported my dream of creating the perfect being and helped to attain it. I was loyal to him because he could help me achieve my dream and because he shared that dream. Between you, my lord, and Tamura Shigaraki, you are infinitely closer to All for One than him. The suit hissed as Nine grunted and stood. And yet here I am trapped in a suit using a third of my quirks and daily doses of medication to stave off cell destruction. It is regrettable, but we are making progress on expanding your version of All for One. Given time I will make you even greater than my old master. You have my word, Lord Nine. Nine smiled behind his mask as he walked away from his throne and said. I believe in you, Doctor, and once your dream is achieved, my own will be within reach. Let us work together for a better, more natural world. Of course, my lord, Garaki said as he bowed his head. I will do my best to live up to your expectations. 6 months ago, only a few days after the death of Hisashi Akatani and the disappearance of his wife and child. Several cars surrounded the Akatani household as police kept any curious eyes away. A white sedan rolled to a stop, and a man with burnt orange hair stepped out. His orange eyes scanned the scene until he spotted an older woman. She noticed his approach and nodded. Mason, glad you could get here so soon. You made it pretty clear this was an important incident, Mason said as he stood next to the woman. What happened? A hero duo and their child were brought here from Japan years ago. They lived here under new identities, but 3 days ago, someone attacked them, and the husband died. The son and mother are missing. You want me to track them down? They were from Japan, right? Attackers may have taken the wife and child back. Yes, here's all the data we have. Cameras showed the wife heading east in an SUV. We'll update you if we find anything else, the woman said as she handed over a tablet. Can you see the kid? Mason asked as he started to look at the footage. No, but they may just be hiding. You have free reign, so if you need to go to Japan, then just go. That's a lot for a hero family. They must have done something amazing or terrible. Mason said as he looked up at his boss. The woman's gaze hardened as she said. Amazing to the point that no one would believe what they were saved from. Got it, Mason said as he tucked the tablet under his arm. Track them down and make sure they're safe. I'll send updates as needed. Good luck, Mason. Thank you, ma'am, Mason said before walking to his car and planning out how he'd track down Inko Akatani. Thanks, Inko muttered as she took her change and headed back to her car. She had stopped at a gas station to pick up food and fuel. As she entered her car, she let out a deep sigh before pulling the notebook out of her backpack. She flipped through several pages full of addresses and sloppy XS through each of them. Tashinori, you are an a-hole, and I wish we had just been neighbors or something. After taking a moment to pop open the bag of Chex Mix and eat some, Inko picked up her notebook again and checked the next address it would take her to South Dakota. These were all based on things they had heard from their witness protection contact or from Tashinori himself before they had gone their separate ways. She had been traveling across the northern half of the USA for any sign or hint of the former symbol of peace, and so far, she had come up with nothing but frustration. Okay. The North is probably a bust. Where would that American-loving man go? Inko sighed and started her car up. I swear to God, Tashinori, if you're in Texas. Inko's SUV pulled out of the gas station and headed south for Colorado. The sun was still high, so she had plenty of time to make progress. Inko cursed as she stuffed her bag and zipped it shut. She had just gotten back to the motel she was crashing at when she saw him. A man with burnt orange hair talking to the receptionist. He had a picture of her and was claiming to be family. As Inko peeked out of her room's door to check if the coast was clear, she quickly headed for her SUV. As she moved, she thought, "DMN it, they sent someone to track me down? They already killed Hisashi and took Mikumo. Are they seriously not going to stop till I'm dead as well?" Inko stopped short of her SUV and looked around. A white sedan wasn't there when she left, so she took a chance and ran up to the vehicle. Inko crouched down and activated her quirk, ripping the tire valve out of the front tire. She quickly circled the car, pulling the remaining 3 out, causing them to hiss and deflate rapidly. As Inko started her car and peeled out of the parking lot, she spotted the orange-haired man. They made eye contact, and he booked it for his car, but as he approached, Inko smiled, and the man screamed profanities and glared at her as she got farther and farther away. Inko smiled as she spotted the blonde hair and the skinny form of Toshinori Yagi. She set down the binoculars and tapped the wheel of the red pickup truck she had traded her SUV for. It was a piece of sheet, but it had gotten her to northeast Texas, where she found a small town. From what she could tell, Toshinori was living a peaceful life as a teacher. As Inko got out of the truck, she muttered, "Sorry, Toshi, but I need your help." "Yeah, I don't think you'll be doing that." Inko whirled around and saw the orange-haired man that had been hounding her down and across America for weeks now. She clicked her tongue, and her hand reached for the gun in the truck, but the man pulled his out first. "Please don't try to shoot me, Mrs. Akatani. I am not your enemy." "Yet you point a gun at me," Inko said as she put her hands up. "Only because I'm trying to keep you from shooting me," Mason said as he sighed and tossed his badge to her. "Look, I'm with the US government. I've been trying to find you and your son for a month and a half now." "Oh, why did it take you so long? I thought people like you were better at your jobs than this," Inko said as she inspected the badge. "Yeah, well, credit is due where it's due. You are very hard to pin down, but now that you're here Mason yelped as his gun was ripped from his hand and into Inko's. He took a step forward before putting his hands up as she pointed the pistol at him. "You know we got found. Had to have been a leak, so how do I know that you're not the one who leaked it? Maybe you're here to finish us off. Bad enough, you kidnapped my son, you also had to kill my husband and chase me down like this." "Your son got taken?" Mason asked. "He isn't with you?" Inko kept her mouth shut but continued to glare at Mason. The man sighed and said, "I apologize in advance for this." Inko tensed, but a sudden burning sensation in her hand made her clench her teeth. She released the gun, which was rapidly heating up. Mason slammed into her, tackling her away from the firearm. Inko's fist was quick to come up and slam into Mason's jaw, staggering the man long enough for her to push him off of her. Inko crawled over towards the dropped gun but yelped as she was yanked away by the ankle. As she reached out with her hand to pull the gun towards her with her quirk, Mason's hand came down and wrenched her arm back. Inko tried to free herself, but he secured both her arms behind her back and put his knee on them as he put his weight on her. Mason breathed hard as he rubbed his sore chin. That hurts. You got quite the punch. Let me up, and I'll show it to you again," Inko growled as she tried to wiggle out from under him. Mason grabbed her by the back of the neck and sighed. "Please, ma'am, I'm not here to fight you or kill you. I am here to try and rescue you and your son. Now, if you would please believe me, we can get off this wet grass and just speak like civilized people." Inko glared at the man but had to concede that if he wanted to kill her, he could have done so by now. "Fine. Truce." "Thank you," Mason said before getting up and grabbing his gun and badge. Once he was a few paces from her, Inko stood up and brushed herself off. "Now, on to business. We need to get you to a safe house, and then once I have all your information, I can start looking for your son." "No." "Huh?" Mason asked as he turned to look at her. "No. I'm not sitting in a safe house and hoping you come back with my son. I'm going down there to talk to Toshinori, and he's going to help me find Mikumo. If you want to help us, I will accept it," Inko said as she moved towards her truck. "That can't happen," Mason said. "Toshinori Yagi does not exist anymore. That man is Joshua Seiho, a high school teacher whose family immigrated 3 generations ago. If you go make contact with him, then we have to assume his cover is blown, and we'll have to relocate him," Mason said as he walked up. "Also, I know his condition, he can't help you." "What? No one should know I got access because I realized the connection between your family and him. I have been given way more clearance than I used to have because of this mission. That's how important your safety is to us." "Y'all did a bang-up job on that end," Inko muttered. "You're not gonna let me go down there, are you?" "I will shoot you and drag you to a safe house," Mason said bluntly. "But since I can tell you won't give up, I have another offer for you." "What offer?" "You come with me. I've been given free rein, so if I think it will help with the mission, I can probably have my way," Mason said as he shrugged. I'm sorry to say, but I feel that it is in her best interest if Inko Akatani stays with me while I track down her son. She has invaluable information, and until we find out how her family was found, I cannot risk her safety by leaving her with people who could be traitors. Inko glared at him for a moment before looking back toward the high school, where she saw Toshi walking around the front of the building, chatting with some students. Fine. Let's go find my son. Mason let out a sigh of relief as he moved towards the truck. Thank you. Inko's hand slammed into the side of the truck as she said, I drive. Mason held his hands up and backed away. All right, that's reasonable. Where are we going? Inko asked as she started the truck up. Mason buckled his seatbelt as he said, Houston. We'll catch a plane and go to California. I have contacts who can help us. There's a good chance your son was taken back to Japan. If that's the case, then the people who came would need to get into the country. There were 10 bodies at your house, a group that size would be notable. They used a warper to get Mikumo, Inko said, causing Mason to curse. This is gonna be a lot harder then. It may take a while to find any leads. We'll start by eliminating possibilities of him being in America, Inko stated as they drove down the road. Sounds like a good plan. I hope we find him sooner rather than later. Yeah. So do I, Inko muttered as she tried to focus on driving. Once Mikumo was safe, she would take the time to grieve. Until then, she needed to stay strong and find her son. Izuku and Himiko were wary of Mamiko and Ainen, but the two women were nothing but kind to them as Izuku recovered in the hospital. Once both kids were cleared for release, they were dressed in some slightly oversized clothes the hospital provided and sent on their way with Ainen and Mamiko. As the two heroes and two children arrived at the apartment complex, Mamiko clicked her tongue and said, My guest room is full of stuff at the moment. Ainen put them up in yours for the night. Ainen sighed and looked at the two kids who were holding each other close while Izuku's still unnamed quirk fluttered around, taking in all the sights around them. I doubt they'd have it any other way right now. Once they arrived at Ainen's apartment, she said, Mamiko, show them to the room and let them settle in. I'll get started on dinner. The kids eyed the adults, Himiko, with much more caution than Izuku. The young boy had experienced a tremendous amount of trauma, but he hadn't developed a total distrust of adults yet, unlike Himiko, who had stewed in the quirk testing facility for years. Once the kids were alone in what would become Izuku's room, his quirk wrapped her arms around Himiko and said, It'll be okay, Himiko. I think they're okay people, and if they aren't, I'll beat them up and save you two again. Himiko smiled and hugged the quirk. It radiated a comforting warmth that made Himiko want to melt into the contact. Thanks, we still don't have a name for you yet. Nope, and that's okay, the quirk said as she released Himiko and hugged Izuku from behind. I want Izuku to name me. I don't care how long it takes because I know any name he gives me is gonna be a good one. I'll try to find a good one, I promise. Maybe the heroes can help me with that. I don't trust them, Himiko muttered. They want us to live in separate rooms. How do we know they won't try something once we're apart? I don't think they will. My mama said heroes are great people. Izuku said as he balled his fist. Even if they do my quirk and I will save you, Himiko. Himiko frowned but sighed and leaned on her friend. You'd better, and I promise I'll try to save you as well, even if my quirk isn't as cool as yours. I think your quirk is amazing. Izuku and his quirk said at the same time. The two looked at each other and grinned before hugging the blonde, who melted into the comforting gesture. Mamiko sighed as she sat on Ainen's couch and said, It's gonna be hard to get those kids to trust us. It'll happen. We just need to be honest and open with them. Ainen said as she started the rice cooker. We have tomorrow off, right? After we clear out your guest room, we should take them shopping for clothes and bedroom stuff. Sounds good, Mamiko said as she stretched her legs. Maybe we spoil them a bit too. They've been through a lot. They deserve some pampering. Ainen smiled. Sounds like a good idea. Now get your butt up and help me with dinner. No one said you got to sit around and wait. Wahat? Mamiko whined as she looked back at Ainen. I'm a guest. Why do I have to cook? You're basically my sister, so shut up and get over here, or I won't make any for you, Ainen said matter-of-factly. Mamiko groaned and got up. I'm gonna tell your mom you're bullying me again. Ainen raised an eyebrow as she said. When have I ever bullied you? All the time, Mamiko grumbled as she looked over what her friend was making. Katsudon. I had some pork I needed to cook, and it's good, so why not? It's been a while since I had this, Mamiko said as she started to help out. Hope the kiddos like it. Himiko eyed her room suspiciously as Mamiko placed her new clothes in the closet. She was feeling on edge since Izuku was a few doors down in Ainen's apartment. Hopefully, his quirk was keeping a better eye out for danger than Izuku was. The boy was very hopeful despite the 6 months of hell he went through. Alright, there we go, all put away, Mamiko said as she stood up and stretched. Now you've got lots of cute outfits. Are you hungry? I'm fine, Himiko said as she stood near the door. Mamiko smiled softly and said, would you like to go see Izuku? Himiko tensed as her eyes flickered around the room nervously. Mamiko simply stayed put and kept her smile up as she said, it's okay if you want to. I'll walk you over to Ainen's place. I just need you to tell me if you want me to. Yes, I would like to see Miyazuku, Himiko said as she balled her fist. She wouldn't drop her guard. These adults were probably up to something, so she'd need to stay on guard. Even if they are heroes, they're also adults, and adults always have something going on, just like the facility adults and just like her parents. She may not remember their faces, but she remembered crying a lot. She didn't want to cry or feel bad again. Come on then, let's get going, Mamiko said as she waited for Himiko to move. Himiko kept her eyes on her before walking out and heading to the front door. Mamiko sighed internally as she kept her distance from the child. It was going to take a lot of work to get her to open up and trust her and Ainen. Hopefully, Izuku's positivity rubs off on Himiko instead of him joining her in her caution. Mamiko yawned as she looked over the designs on her laptop screen. It was late, and she really should get to bed, but she had been so busy and hadn't had time for her hobby recently, and right now, she was determined to put in some work on it. The only issue was that she was feeling lost. She was staring at the partial outfit she had been designing last week. There was an idea of something here, but she could not for the life of her tell what past Mamiko had been going for. What the f-? Mamiko's central snake woke up, and its tongue flicked, sending its findings to Mamiko's mind. The woman hummed and made no move to let Himiko know that she knew she was standing there behind her in the doorway. Mamiko sighed again as she looked at her notes and tried to remind herself of what she had planned to do. As she tried to work, her snake relayed that Himiko seemed to be trying to see what she was doing. Mamiko sighed a little more loudly as she leaned to the side and rested her head on her hand, giving Himiko a view of her screen. Man, I think I'm gonna have to scrap this. Guess I'll start over tomorrow. Mamiko tapped away at her computer a bit to look at the other clothing designs she had done before while making sure to linger long enough for Himiko to get a good look at them. After a few minutes, Mamiko stretched and shut down her laptop before getting up and walking over to the kitchen, giving Himiko time to scamper away. She smiled a bit and got a glass of water before heading to bed, hoping Himiko was satisfied with her snooping. Himiko stared at her clothes and thought back to 2 nights ago when she had spied on Mamiko. She had heard the woman was still up and gone to investigate. She had expected quiet talks about their true intentions with Izuku and herself. Instead, she saw the woman looking at drawings and pictures of clothes. Himiko lingered and waited, hoping to find proof of their deception, and as she watched, she noticed how nice some of the outfits looked, and a little spark of interest had reluctantly lit up in the back of her mind. Now she was standing here, unable to ignore the little spark. Himiko grabbed a pair of pants and a shirt and put them on her bed before nodding. They looked nice together, in her opinion. The young girl tensed as Mamiko knocked on the door and said, "Are you ready to go, Himiko?" "Why yes, I am," Himiko said quickly as she got dressed and exited the room. As she rushed to the door, she stopped a few feet from Mamiko, who was slipping her shoes on. The woman looked at her and smiled. "Oh, you look lovely today." Himiko huffed and kept quiet as the blonde woman stood up. "Come on, I gotta get you to Izuku so Ainen can head to work." Himiko kept her annoyance to herself as she quickly slipped her shoes on and followed Mamiko. The 2 adults had not left them alone ever since they moved in. They simply alternated who would watch over them. Mamiko didn't even bother knocking as she simply unlocked Ainen's apartment and walked in. "Ainen, you ready to go? I told you to knock," Ainen said as she came around the corner, and Himiko blinked as she looked at Ainen's hand. She could have sworn for just a second that the woman's hand looked distorted, almost like 2 flavors of pudding swirled together. Mamiko said as she took her shoes off. "Hurry up and get going already." Ainen sighed and looked over at the couch where Himiko spotted Izuku and his quirk. "Have a good day, all of you, and behave." "I'll make sure they behave," Mamiko said as Ainen turned to look at her. "I meant you to," Ainen said as she walked past her friend. Mamiko huffed as Himiko quickly ran over to Izuku. "You've been awfully rude recently." Ainen sighed as she slipped her shoes on and said, "I am one comment away from either killing a man or quitting the magazine and just focusing on hero work." "Is he really still causing issues? Why hasn't anyone taken care of him? Didn't we file complaints with HR?" Mamiko asked as she looked at her friend with concern. She had luckily been spared the harassment that had started to creep into the magazine they were modeling for, but Ainen and several others hadn't been so lucky. "I don't have time to get into all of that," Ainen said. "I'm giving them one more chance, and I swear if it happens again Please don't kill anyone, Mamiko whined. I don't want to hide a body. You make it sound like there would be a body to hide, Ainin said as she wiggled her fingers. Okay, that's scary, Mamiko said as her snakes recoiled. I'm making an executive decision. Huh? Ainin said as her friend grabbed her wrist and tugged her back toward the apartment. I need to go. Nope, we're going to put together a report about everything that's gone on, and then I'm gonna call Ms. Kayama and see if she can help us out. Ainin tensed and quickly pulled her hand free. Kayama? As in Namiri Kayama, also known as Midnight? Mamiko nodded as she turned around. Yeah, remember I told you I met her at that party a couple years ago. She helped me deal with some clingy chick who was a little too interested in my snakes. She said if I ever needed help to give her a call. Why is your face like that? No reason, Ainin said too quickly. Mamiko scanned her friend's face for a moment before a smile spread across it, and she chuckled. Oh, that's what this is. Does someone have a crush on the woman voted sexiest hero in Japan? I do not have a crush. I am not a teenager. Ainin grumbled. As Mamiko started to tease her friend Himiko watched the entryway suspiciously. What are they doing over there? Himiko, please stop it, Izuku grumbled. They're heroes, and they're taking care of us. Just sit with me and watch this show, nothing bad is gonna happen. Himiko watched the two adults walk back in and narrowed her eyes. Mamiko smiled as she said. Change of plans, kids, Ainin isn't going to work today. We'll be in her room working on some work stuff, so behave while we're back there. Once we're done, we can head out to the park or something if you want. Izuku's quirk manifested itself out of his back and snapped a salute. Will do, ma'am. I'll make sure these two don't get into any trouble until park time. Mamiko and Ainin chuckled as they headed to Ainin's room to work on the report. Once the adults were gone, Himiko watched the door until Izuku tugged on her shirt. Himiko. Himiko sat down and pouted, causing Izuku to frown until he remembered something he wanted to tell Himiko. His quirk smiled as she saw the look on his face. Before he could speak, the quirk spoke up. Hey, Himiko. Izuku and I have some cool news. Huh? Himiko muttered as she looked over. What's up? Izuku smiled as his quirk hugged him from behind and rested her head on top of his. Ainin was helping me think of ideas for my quirk by showing me a bunch of stuff, and I realized what I want to call her. Himiko's face brightened. Her joy far outweighed the little pang of jealousy that she felt at the fact that Ainin was the one who was with him when he figured it out instead of herself. What did you pick? Izuku grinned and held his hand out toward his quirk as he said. I'd like you to meet Hestia. The quirk beamed with pride as she puffed out her chest and placed her hands around where her hips would be if her body didn't turn into a simple cone of fire from the torso down. Himiko tilted her head as she said. Hestia? It sounds cute, but what the heck does that mean? It's a super old name, Izuku said as he bounced in place. Some place called Greece used to worship gods or something, and one of them was called Hestia. She was in charge of the hearth and the home or something like that. What's a hearth? Himiko asked as she looked at the flaming quirk as it hummed happily. I think it's a fireplace or something, Izuku said. Ainin told me, but I was kinda tired, so I forgot. I like it. Hestia said, a home is a place where you should feel safe. I'm gonna do my best to make sure Izuku feels safe anywhere he calls home. Himiko chuckled as the quirk wrapped her in a warm hug. Of course, I'll keep you safe too, Himi. Thank you, Hestia. Himiko said as she hugged the quirk, I feel safer already. Inko tapped her fingers slowly and rhythmically as she stared out the window of the apartment she was currently living in. She was watching the people down below wander about their days as her mind kept playing that terrible day 4 months ago over and over again. Hisashi's eyes losing the light and life she had fallen in love with, and the confused look on Mikumo's face as he was taken from right in front of her. The cold dread and anger that filled her soul and festered beneath her skin since that day had worn down her patience gradually, and now as she sat here, the idea of ditching Mason was becoming a strong possibility. The door clicked, and Inko's other hand tightened on the gun in her lap even as Mason announced his presence. She looked out of the corner of her eye, and when she saw he was alone, she loosened her grip. Hello. Mason nodded as he set down some bags of groceries. Inko's eye twitched as she said. I thought you said you were meeting with someone to get information. Why do you have groceries? Because we need to stock up, Mason said as he started to put them away. Also, I did meet with my informant. Buying groceries with her was part of the cover. 2 birds, 1 stone. Inko sighed and turned her attention back to the window as she asked. Did you learn anything? We've been here too long. I know, and yes, I did, Mason said as he closed the fridge and walked over to sit across from her. He placed his phone on the little table between them and said, Your son is almost certainly in Japan. My informant told me about a group of foreigners who arrived in California one day. No one knew how they got into the country, and then they ripped off one of her friends and stole a car and guns. Then they drove up to Washington to take us out, Inko muttered. Mason nodded as his orange eyes scanned the people walking down the sidewalks. Yeah. We can catch a plane like normal, or if you can wait a week, we can catch a smuggler's ship and meet up with someone in Japan who can help us out. Why can't we just catch a plane now and go see them? They won't meet with us unless we do some work for them. Guarding the smuggler's ship and unloading the goods is what they want. After that, they'll help us. Or, Inko said as she reaffirmed her grip on the gun. We find out who they are and then track them down and make them tell us. Inko dash. Akatani. Inko said, cutting him off. Mason held his hands up as he said. Akatani. Please don't be so rash. If we just take our time dash. Take our time? Inko asked as an almost hysterical laugh bubbled out of her chest. Do you have kids? A lover or partner of any kind? Mason flinched as he looked at her. No, I don't have anything like that. My job isn't conducive to relationships and families. Then you don't understand what I'm feeling right now. The fact that I've sat here this long and played things your way is a miracle, and I am very close to losing the little patience I have left. Mikumo is my son and the only connection I have to Hayashi now. Inko stood up as she glared at Mason, and said, I'm getting my son back, and I'm not going to bend over backward to help some scumbag smuggler or anyone else. Mason stood up and quickly stood between the door and Inko as he said, Please, Akatani, I'm doing things this way for your son's sake. If we go in guns blazing, making noise, and shaking up the underworld, the people who took Mikumo are going to catch wind and go to ground. Then I'll burn the ground until there's nowhere left for them to hide. Inko shouted as she took a step forward. And you'll get your son killed. Mason shouted back as he refused to back down. Inko felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped on her as she stumbled back, and Mason said at a more appropriate volume. You know I'm right. I get it, okay. I may not have experienced the joys of parenthood and the wonder of being in love, but I understand. We just need to be careful because your son's life is on the line. If we don't do this right, then he could end up dead. Inko quickly wiped the tears away as she tried to banish the thought of her son being dead at her feet. Aye. Oh God. Mason watched as Inko slowly sank to the ground and curled in on herself as she sobbed and felt the weight of her suffering and the possible ramification of her rash actions. As she wept, Mason shuffled about, unsure of what to do. He hadn't ever had to be the one to deal with a crying woman. As he thought about what to do, a memory came to him. One of his mother and how she comforted him when he came home crying. Inko sobbed and took shaky breaths as she let her grief flow. Eventually, she started to calm down, and as her senses came back to her, she smelled something cooking. Inko looked up towards the kitchen and saw Mason stirring a pot. What are you doing? Mason looked up and said. Oh, you're not crying anymore. Are you hungry? Wah, I guess, Inko said as she got up and sniffled before wiping the rest of her tears away. What are you making? Bacon mac and cheese, Mason said as he turned the stove off. My mom used to make this when I was feeling like shit. Carbs, cheese, and bacon to make the bad feelings a little more manageable. That sounds very unhealthy. How long have you lived in America? Mason asked as he filled up 2 bowls. Treating yourself to something you know is bad is a cornerstone of living. I suppose, Inko said as she took the bowl and sat down at her seat by the window. She thought back to what she cooked before her family was torn apart. It was mostly Japanese foods, but she had recently been adding more American foods to the menu, mostly at Izuku and Hisashi's combined behest. Inko took a bite and said, I feel like I need to go for a jog after I finish this, but it is good. Thank you for everything you've done so far, and I suppose I can wait a week and take the smuggler's ship. Mason smiled as he said. No problem. Just doing my job, ma'am, and thank you for coming around to my plan. Ainen yawned as she tapped at her computer. It was getting late, and she needed to get to sleep. She was going to be meeting Midnight of all people tomorrow to figure out what she and Mamiko should do about the issues they had run into at the magazine they were modeling at. Ainen felt her cheeks start to heat up as she thought about how she was going to meet Midnight in person for the first time. In Ainen's opinion, Midnight was a really cool hero who stood up for a lot of good causes that a lot of people didn't want to get involved in or pretended weren't a problem. Ainen rubbed her eyes as unpleasant memories started to surface. She was not in the mood to walk down memory lane. She turned her attention back to her laptop in an attempt to refocus, not that she was finding much success in her original goal. Advancements in prosthetics were making leaps and bounds every year. However, the price for them was still obnoxious, adding in the fact that giving one to a child would mean having to adjust the length and possibly switch out for entirely new limbs as they grew, and suddenly Ainen was wishing she was in the top 10 so she could even think about affording something like this. The door to the living room opened, and Ainen looked up from the dining room table as Izuku wandered in while trying to rub the sleep from his eyes. The young boy jumped in surprise as Ainen spoke. "What are you doing up so late?" "Want water?" Izuku mumbled as he wandered over to the kitchen. Ainen smiled and got up to grab the glass that was just out of Izuku's reach. She filled it up and handed it to the child as she said, "There you go. Drink up and then go to sleep. It's not good to stay up late." "Then why are you awake?" Izuku asked after sipping his glass of water. "Ah, you got me there," Ainen muttered. "To be honest, I was looking at prosthetics." "Prosthetic? What's that?" Here, let me show you," Ainen said as she sat at the dining table and picked Izuku up, setting him in her lap. "Here, they're made of metal and stuff. People who lose limbs can get them to replace what they lost. I was gonna ask you at some point if you wanted one." Izuku looked at the various arms and legs that were being shown off on the website Ainen had been browsing. "Wow, those look so cool." "Yeah, they are, and every year the people who make them seem to be improving them," Ainen said as she tried not to look at the other tabs she had opened that talked about the prices for purchase and maintenance. "They do look cool, but I think I'm okay," Izuku said as he smiled up at her. "I have Hestia now, so it's okay." "Oh well, if you ever change your mind, don't be afraid to ask," Ainen said as she let him get down. "I'll help you out no matter what, Izuku. You just gotta ask." Izuku nodded. "I know. I'll try to get Himiko to understand as well." Ainen chuckled as she powered down her laptop. "I appreciate the help. Now off to bed with you." "Good night, Ainen." "Good night, Izuku." Ainen smiled as the young boy carefully returned to his room with his glass of water in hand. Once she was pretty sure he was settled in, she headed to her room and fell asleep quickly. "We should sign the kids up for homeschooling," Mamiko said as she looked over the papers they were going to show Namiri. "Huh?" Ainen asked as she looked up. As the time grew closer, she felt herself getting more nervous. Midnight was going to show up and be in her apartment. She was going to sit at her dining table and look over all the issues she had been dealing with and offer advice. "Himiko and Izuku," Mamiko said as she looked up at her friend. "They need an education, but I don't think we should send them to public school yet. Maybe once they're old enough to go to junior high, they can go, but for now, I think it would be safer for them to be homeschooled." "That sounds like a good idea," Ainen muttered as the doorbell rang. "We'll look into it later today." "Sounds good," Mamiko said as she went and checked who was at the door. She smiled and whispered, "Put on your most stuck face, Ainen, she's here." Ainen stuck her tongue out at her friend before trying to look as composed as possible as Mamiko opened the door and let Namiri Kayama in. Ainen was surprised to see her in an oversized gray sweater and an ankle-length black skirt. Her hair was pulled up into a high ponytail, and she wore a pair of red triangular-framed glasses. The woman smiled and bowed her head slightly to Mamiko. "It's nice to see you again, Hebata." "It's good to see you again as well, Kayama. I'm grateful that you were able to come out and help us today," Mamiko said as she led Namiri into the apartment. "This is Ainen Kuroz, my best friend and one of the people who has been having problems at the magazine." Ainen nodded and said, "It's nice to meet you, ma'am. I'm grateful that you could help us." "Haha, you don't need to call me ma'am. Kayama is fine," Namiri said as she waved her hand. "All right, Kayama," Ainen said as she grabbed the report. "Here's all the information we could gather. We talked to the other girls who had run into the same problem." Namiri took a seat, and as she read over the papers, Mamiko made tea while Ainen answered any questions Namiri asked about what she was reading. After a few moments, Namiri sighed and said, "I think what you can do right now is gather up everyone who has complaints and get them down in writing. Submit that directly to upper management. Something in HR is obviously not working, so you need to go around them. Quitting would be an option, but it seems a lot of the models have contracts that need to be fulfilled." Namiri looked up as Mamiko set down some tea. "Thank you." Mamiko nodded and took a seat next to Ainen, who looked very annoyed. "So all we can do is go to upper management and hope it gets fixed? And then leave the magazine when you can if it doesn't," Namiri said. "You could look into getting out of the contracts, but that would be a lot of legal battles. You'd need plenty of money and good lawyers. Some of the girls may not be willing or able to sit through that much trouble." Ainen sighed and rubbed her eyes. "Great. I guess we'll just hope the upper management is willing and able to listen to our complaints." "I wish you the best of luck," Namiri said. "And you know if that doesn't work, you can always leak what's been going on. Just tell me ahead of time, so I can get ready to jump into the argument that'll happen." The three women chuckled, and Namiri stayed for almost an hour helping Ainen and Mamiko work out how they would word and structure the complaint and how to add each of the women's grievances. Mamiko and Ainen thanked the woman as she took her leave. As Namiri left the apartment complex, she hummed and turned over several ideas in her head. She hadn't been involved in the fashion world very much, and this was only one magazine, but in her opinion, if a problem showed up once, it showed up 100 times before, but no one spoke up about it. Namiri sighed as she put her thoughts on the back burner. She needed to head to UA and grade some papers before the day ended. Ainin slouched on the couch and groaned as she let her muscles relax. She had patrolled all day yesterday and this morning, and then some villains caused mayhem. She had to clean up 3 blocks worth of debris while pulling civilians from the wreckage. Luckily Mamiko had the kids right now, so she could just lay here and relax for a bit. The door to her apartment slammed open, and Ainin groaned as she heard Izuku and Himiko run by. The former of which said hello as his quirk came out and said, "Hello, Ainin, we're back from the mall. We bought things." "How nice," Ainin muttered as Mamiko walked in and set down some bags. "It's some things to make their rooms feel more like theirs," Mamiko explained as she sat next to Ainin's head. Ainin groaned as her friend smiled. "Saw you on the news today. You cleaned up the wreckage and saved a few people. Good work." "Thanks," Ainin muttered. "So I had thought while I was buying stuff for the kids." "That's dangerous," Ainin said as she sat up, accepting that she wasn't going to get the nap she wanted. "Shut up," Mamiko said as she punched her friend's arm. "Anyways, my idea is that after this magazine sheet settles down and we can leave the company, I say we start our own." "Huh?" Ainin looked over at her friend like she had grown a second head. "You want to open a magazine? What about being a hero?" "That's the thing," Mamiko said as she got up and started to brim with excitement. "I'm a search and rescue hero. Most days, I have nothing going on, so why not set up a fashion magazine where we can make sure this crap doesn't happen? We can also use the magazine and our positions as heroes to advocate for things we believe in." Mamiko grinned as she said. "Also, as the magazine grows more popular, we get more popular and vice versa. That'll help us reach more people and let them know about the causes we think need more support. So basically, you want to use the systems that are in place to try and do some good?" Ainin asked to make sure her friend wasn't concocting some scheme to make money or just get famous. "Yeah, pretty much," Mamiko said as she plopped down next to Ainin. "The current hero system is a little, well, you know, and neither of us has the power to change it, so we may as well use it to our advantage to do some good." "I see," Ainin said as she rubbed her eyes. "I guess I'm on board. It sounds like a good plan, but I'm gonna keep my hero name out of it." Mamiko grinned as she threw her arm around her friend's shoulders. I know. Now come on, you're not doing anything, so help me look into what we're gonna need." Ainin signed and accepted her fate. Inko grumbled as she hung onto the railing. "Stupid boats. We're coming up on the docks now," Mason said in his annoyingly non-seasick tone. "Good," Inko said as she held back a wave of nausea. "I'm never getting a boat again." "I'll be sure to book us some first-class tickets once we get your son back," Mason said as he patted her back gently. "Ugh, I don't care as long as it's not a boat," Inko said as she lurched and held back the nausea. Her stomach was already empty. There was nothing left for her to throw up, but her body still insisted on trying. Half an hour later, the boat docked, and Inko disembarked as quickly as she could. As she gained her bearings and tried to settle her stomach, a man with the head of a black cat approached her and Mason. "You the two Jessica told me about? You must be Cheyenne." "I'm Mason, that's Inko. She have a hard time on the boat?" the Catman asked as he watched Inko lay on the dock and groan. "Yeah. Give her a minute, and she'll be back on her feet," Mason said as he looked around the docks. "Jessica said you wanted us to help unload in exchange for the info we want. That deal still good?" "Yeah, it's good. As long as you two pull your weight," Cheyenne said before walking off. "The others will show you what to grab and where to put it." Once Inko was able to stand up again, she and Mason got to work unloading the cargo. Once everything was in place, Cheyenne reappeared and said, "So you want info? What are you asking about?" "We're looking for a kid who got kidnapped," Mason said. "We know the kidnappers took him to Japan. Know anyone who would do that?" Cheyenne looked disgusted as he said, "Ugh, kidnappers? Nasty business. The only ones here who deal with that are foreigners or the TKN." "TKN?" Inko asked as she crossed her arms. "Who the hell is that?" "The Kingdom of Nine," Cheyenne said with his continued look of disgust. "The lower ranks are pretty normal, but the higher up you go, the more fanatical they get. It's basically a cult that worships their leader, Nine. They see him as some kind of god or something that's gonna usher in a new age. Bunch of nut jobs once you get past the normal hired muscle." "Where can we find them?" Mason asked. "Most of northern Tokyo is their turf," Cheyenne said as he pulled a notepad out and scribbled something down. "This is an address of a bar their grunts like to frequent. Before you ask, no, I don't know where they keep the kids they take or who supplies them. If you want more info, go hit up the bar and rattle some skulls. Thanks for the information, Cheyenne, Mason said as he took the note. Appreciate doing business with you. Whatever. Get off my dock before I get annoyed seeing your faces. Inko bit her tongue and simply walked off as Mason caught up to her. They had their information, now, all they needed was a base of operations, and they'd be able to start their search for her son. Himiko tried not to grumble as she looked over the material Ainen had just finished teaching them. Over the past couple of weeks, Ainen and Mamiko had been taking turns teaching the two kids the material provided to them when they signed the kids up for homeschooling. Himiko was not feeling this whole school thing, but Izuku and Hestia had encouraged her, and she found it very hard to go against the two of them. Her concentration was slipping, though, and so she laid her head on the dining table in Ainen's apartment and said, "Can't work. Can we take a break?" Hestia asked as she floated over to Ainen, who was sitting on the couch watching the news. The hero tensed before turning to Hestia. Huh? Oh, yes, you can. You've all been doing good so far. I'm proud of you three. Himiko held back a scoff and simply pushed her schoolwork away from her as she looked at Izuku, who was staring at Ainen. What are you staring at? I think I want to be a hero, Izuku stated, causing Himiko and Ainen to sit up. The former looked confused, while the latter seemed surprised. Why? Himiko asked. Because they're cool, Izuku said as he looked at her. They keep people safe, and it's thanks to them that you and I are okay. Ainen and Mamiko saved us, and I think that's cool. I want to do it too. So do I, Hestia said as she floated over and hugged Izuku. They kept you two safe for me while I was resting, so I think they're cool. What about you, Himi? Izuku asked as his eyes shined brightly. Himiko glanced at Ainen, who was doing a wonderful job at not looking at the kids. I don't know. Himiko said as she pouted. Izuku's smile dimmed a bit, but before the boy could say anything, Ainen stood up. It's okay not to know, Himiko. You two are young, so you've got plenty of time to think about this kind of stuff. In the meantime, why don't you two go play in Izuku's room? We can pick up these lessons later. The two kids nodded and hurried off to Izuku's room. Once the door was shut, Ainen pulled her phone out and called Mamiko. Did you see the news? Yeah, I did, Mamiko said. It was on in the agency when I got back from patrol. It looks like it's going to be a big one. Yeah, Ainen said as she looked at the news as the weatherman talked about an incoming tsunami. Luckily, we're far enough inland that it shouldn't be a problem, but we're both going to be very busy after it hits. Do you think Tsukachi can watch the kids? I'll call him right now, Ainen said as she glanced at Izuku's door. I'll also tell them about the tsunami before you get back. Sorry, you have to do so much of the lifting today, Mamiko said as she moved to the locker rooms. I'll try to finish up at the magazine quickly today. Don't worry about it. Just make sure to get everyone on the same page with the letter. Will do, Mamiko said before hanging up. You worried about the kids or the disaster areas? Uwabami asked as she and Ainen sat in the back of an HPSC transport vehicle. Mostly the disaster areas. Tsukachi said Officer Tamakawa was good with kids, so they should be fine. 13 said as she glanced at the rest of the transport. It was almost half as full as it should have been. The southern coast got hit so much harder. Yeah, it looks like we're going to be a little short-staffed here, Uwabami muttered as the truck came to a stop. 13 bit back her annoyance and double-checked her helmet before stepping out and into what should have been the emergency treatment site, but 13 was convinced that they had to have been dropped off at the wrong area. There were some tents set up, and a few civilians were being treated, but there was rubble clearly in the way of key paths, and many people, heroes included, were standing around as overlapping and sometimes contradicting orders were being shouted from all sides. It's a mess here, Uwabami said as she and 13 moved away from where the transports were coming in. Let's find who's in charge. 13 said as she headed for one of the tents that had several heroes around it. If anyone's actually in charge, Uwabami muttered as she fell into step behind her friend. The two heroes approached a group who were just standing around, looking unsure of what to do. 13 looked at a blond man with insect wings sprouting from his forearms. Hey, who's in charge? Airjet's doing a fly around. He said he'd take command when he got back. Before 13 could question if the man in front of her could fly, another hero spoke up. What are you talking about? Airjet got sent south. We're waiting for Mandalay from the Pussycats to show up. Another hero spoke up about how the Pussycats were all down south as well. Several others chimed in with who they thought was in charge. 13 clenched her fist as she watched everyone try to avoid the responsibility while standing around doing nothing to help anyone while others were running around with no direction. Shut up! 13 yelled as she stepped in front of the others. I'm in charge. This is the base of operations. Tell me your quirks and we'll assign you roles. I'll tell you which channels to tune into. Iwabumi, I need your help. Roger, Iwabumi said as she stepped up next to her best friend. 13 called over heroes and assigned them roles and groups, while Iwabumi joined up with the more search-oriented heroes and began setting up a search grid. While the heroes were grouping up and began to search in an organized manner, 13 grabbed Iwabumi before she could leave. Make sure this area is actually clear before I get rid of the debris that's in the way. Will do, Iwabumi said as her 3 snakes rose from her hair and began flickering their tongues while she walked around the debris. After a few moments, the blonde hero gave a thumbs up and announced, "It's all clear, 13. You can start cleaning up." 13 nodded, and as the cap on her pointer finger popped open, she announced, "I'm using my quirk, please stay clear of the debris, and don't get in front of me." 13 began reducing the rubble to dust as the rest of the heroes started to sweep the areas affected by the tsunami. As the space hero cleared out a sizable area, several buses arrived, and 13 stood a little straighter as Midnight and Ectoplasm stepped off the first bus while a small fleet of robots began pulling resources off the other buses. Midnight smiled as she approached 13. "Well, I didn't expect to see you here, 13. Who's in charge?" "I am," 13 said, making the more experienced hero blink in surprise. "It was a mess when I showed up, so I got things in order. I'll happily transfer command over to you, Ms. Midnight Dash." "No, you stay in charge. You seem to have done a good job getting things organized," Midnight said as she waved to Ectoplasm, who nodded and walked over. "Nizu sent us along with some resources since he noticed this area was being neglected. We have tents, cots, and plenty of medical supplies. Where do you want us to set up?" 13 looked over the now cleared base of operations and pointed to where the emergency services were hard at work treating patients. "Set up treatment next to them and over there if you could put some places for those who are already treated and those who aren't injured too badly. Also, can we use the buses to shuttle the severely injured?" Ectoplasm nodded as he said, "I'll have my clones drive. The buses come equipped with emergency lights, so they should be able to get to the hospital swiftly. Though a helicopter landing area would be useful. I doubt we'll get any to come this way, considering the other areas, but I'll clear a spot out," 13 said as she started scanning the nearby area. "Before that, I'll get you 2 integrated into the search parties. I'll direct the robots. Once they're done setting up, I'll join the efforts," Midnight said before walking off to the robots and pointed to where 13 had ordered them to set up. As 13 and Ectoplasm were going to integrate the clones into the rescue efforts, 13 stopped and turned to see a robot staring at her. The lens shifted, and after a moment that made the space hero feel like she was being stared at by something other than a robot, it turned and rolled away to join the others. 13 quickly brushed off the weird feeling and got back to work. Meanwhile, back at UA, Nizu refilled his tea as he looked at the information in front of him. The HPSC was competent at organizing and managing rescue efforts, but they always seemed not to have enough resources for some areas to get adequate aid. No worries, Nizu had nothing, if not an abundance of resources and staff, all of which he would use to supplement their efforts. Sure, none of that would make it to the news, but it didn't matter. The heroes at those places that suffered would know, and every so often, he would find something or someone that caught his attention. The Space Hero 13, aka Ainen Kuro's quirk, Black Hole, her fingertips could turn into a vortex on par with a black hole. The vortex was able to pull in anything within a 20-meter cone in front of her and reduce it to dust, which was sucked into her and seemed to simply vanish. Even light was unable to escape her quirk. It was quite fascinating, and Nizu felt an itch of curiosity steadily growing in his mind. He wanted to know how her quirk worked, but more importantly, he wanted her at his school. Nizu tapped away to look at the other info he had found on her in his quick search. She was a UA alumni, which was wonderful news. He was sad to see that she had graduated before he was a teacher. The things he could have learned if he'd only managed to escape his torment a few years earlier. Nizu shook off his disappointment. No use worrying about the past, he had the future to look forward to. Ainen Kuro's was also a model, which wasn't odd. Sadly, the hero industry was not perfect, and he could see why she would struggle and need a secondary job. She focused mainly on rescue work, and by the looks of things, she was good at it. Sadly, that did not translate to a hefty paycheck from the HPSC. A file caught the Rat King's eyes, and Nizu opened the police report attached to her hero file. He sighed as he read the report. While most people thought he was incapable of understanding human emotion, they were wrong. He felt things just like them, and he could understand them from time to time, but his enhanced intelligence also allowed him to see the logical side of things and to find solutions to problems that those affected by the problem were unable to see due to their emotional investment. He understood pain most of all, and he valued those who were heroes despite suffering painful things. The principal of UA nodded to himself before sipping his tea and making a decision. Airjet was retiring soon, and Nizu had been wanting to hire a more rescue-focused heroics teacher who would help supplement the heroics classes with more rescue-based training, and now it seems he had found the perfect candidate. Now all he needed to do was take advantage of the most confounding human emotions to him. Romantic attraction. Sterile white rooms, pairs of red and blue eyes staring at her, hands grabbing at her as needles were jabbed into her. A scream built up in her throat as something inside her broke and she craved blood. Himiko screamed and thrashed in her bed as the memories clawed at her mind and forced her to remember the pain of the experiments and her starvation. Her fear was all-consuming, it blinded her to her surroundings, and so she didn't see the door to her room swing open, nor did she hear Mamiko's initial calling of her name. It was only as hands pulled Himiko into a gentle hug that she registered the woman's words. "It's okay. It'll be okay, I promise. It was just a nightmare. You're safe," Mamiko whispered. Reason came back to Himiko, and a flood of unfamiliar emotions washed over the young girl. Despite her mistrust, Himiko broke and clutched at Mamiko's shirt as tears overflowed, and Himiko cried her heart out for the first time since she was rescued. Mamiko scooted farther onto the bed as she held Himiko and gently rubbed her back as she let the girl ride out her emotions. Once the tears slowly came to a stop, Mamiko expected Himiko to push herself away, but she didn't. She instead continued to cling to the older woman. "Hey, come on, I need to get up." Himiko made a noise of discomfort and continued to hold on. Mamiko rubbed her back gently and said, "I promise I won't be gone long. I want to get something to help you feel better." When the girl refused to let go, Mamiko sighed and said, "How about you come with me then?" That seemed to be a satisfactory compromise as Himiko backed off enough to let Mamiko get up. The young girl grabbed her shirt and followed closely behind Mamiko as she went to the kitchen. Himiko watched as Mamiko went about making 2 cups of hot chocolate before leading them over to the couch. "Careful, it's hot." Himiko took the mug and blew on it gently before taking a sip. The warm liquid helped warm her chest and ease the tension in her body. The two sat in silence for several moments before Mamiko spoke up. "You know, I used to have a lot of nightmares as a kid, thanks to my quirk. My mom would always make hot chocolate for me. It always helped me calm down." Himiko stewed in her thoughts momentarily before asking, "Why did your quirk cause nightmares?" Mamiko smiled and reached up to gently pet one of the sleepy snakes. "These snakes are semi-independent. While I was growing up, they were growing with me, and it caused my brain to be a little unbalanced, and I had nightmares about them biting me or trying to take over my body." Mamiko chuckled, seeing Himiko's shocked face. "Yeah, not pleasant, but I managed." Himiko stared at her hot chocolate for a moment before saying, I want blood." Mamiko stared at the young girl for a moment before asking, "Blood?" Himiko nodded quickly and muttered, When they made my quirk come in, I started wanting to drink blood. You never said anything when we took you in." "I'm scared. I don't understand it, and I don't like it. It makes me feel weird," Himiko said as she started to tremble. Mamiko took the girl's cup and set it down on the table before rubbing her back gently. "It's okay. If you let me, I'll do my best to help you figure it all out." Himiko stared at the older blonde and thought about how much Izuku trusted her and Ainen before nodding and whispering, "Oh, okay." The two sat in a more comfortable silence until their hot chocolate was gone. By the following day, Himiko woke up feeling better than when she had the night before. Ainen smiled as she watched Himiko, Izuku, and Hestia working diligently on their schoolwork. A knock at the door pulled the hero from her thoughts, and when she checked who it was, Ainen felt her heart start to beat a little faster. Hello Kayama. What brings you here?" Ainen said after opening the door. Namuri chuckled as she held up an envelope. "Sorry I didn't message you beforehand, Nizu kinda dropped this on me at the last minute. Can I come in?" "Yes," Ainen said quickly as she stepped aside. As Namuri entered the kitchen, she spotted the kids. "You have kids?" It's a long story," Ainen said as she walked over to her. Namuri chuckled as she handed Ainen the envelope. "Well, maybe you can tell me about it while grading papers. That is if you'd like to accept what's inside here." Ainen took the envelope and opened it to reveal a letter and paperwork. Ainen quickly read the letter before looking at Namuri and then rereading the letter. "Is this real?" "Yes. We have an opening for a heroics teacher, and Nizu would like you to teach rescue specifically." I mean, there are more qualified people, aren't there?" Ainen asked. "I'm not that experienced or well known." Namuri shrugged. "I don't know his thought process, but being well known isn't really something Nizu cares about." Ainen looked at the letter again and focused on one part in particular. This paragraph here. Did he mistype? Namiri leaned over and read the part Ainin had been looking at. Her eyes widened, and she pulled her phone out. Let me check. Ainin watched as Namiri talked on the phone for a moment before hanging up and laughing. Wow, so that's not a mistake. He really means it. You'll have full access to UA's funds and you'll be given a plot of land on UA's campus in order to construct whatever facilities you think you'll need. Ainin took a shaky breath as she sat down at the dining table and stared at her ceiling. Why is this happening? Don't know, Namiri said as she shrugged. If you accept, you can go ask Nizu himself. Can I think about this? Ainin asked, really hoping she would get at least a day to think it over. Namiri nodded. Take all the time you need. The offer will stand open until you make a decision. Oh great, that somehow adds more pressure. Namiri smiled and patted her shoulder. Personally, I think you should take it. You'll still have plenty of time for hero work, obviously, as well as that modeling career of yours if you want to continue it. Ainin felt her ears heat up rapidly as Namiri leaned in close and whispered. I think you should continue that as well because you're very good at it. As the dark-haired woman stood up, she looked over to see the kids staring. Namiri waved as she said. Hello, you two. Oh, you three. Hi, Hestia said chipperly as Himiko shrank back and Izuku's eyes scanned the newcomer. Are you a hero? Izuku asked. Namiri nodded as she walked over. Yep, I'm Midnight. I work at UA, and I'm here offering your mama a job. Mama? Hestia asked. Is Ainin our mama? Izuku shook his head. She's Ainin. Mama is somewhere in America. Namiri looked back at Ainin, who rubbed her face and said. It's complicated. Also, Izuku, please don't go telling people where you're originally from. Oh right, Izuku said as he covered his mouth. I'm sorry. It's okay, Ainin said as she got up. As for Nizu's offer, I'll take it. I want to make sure the coming generations know what to do in rescue situations. I'll help you with the paperwork then. Let's get started. Namiri said as she patted Izuku's head. All right, let's get down to business, Mason said as he shoved the woman into the wall. They were several blocks from the bar, tucked in a dark place between hero patrol routes. No one would notice them here. The dark-haired woman groaned as she looked at Inko. You know I had you pegged as a wild gal, but this is a bit much, don't you think? Who's your friend? Husband? Partner in crime? A resource I'm using, Inko said blankly as she stared at the woman, causing Mason to sigh. Here, I thought we were finally becoming friends. Please don't talk, Inko told him before turning her attention to the woman. You work for the Kingdom of Nine, right? Yeah, I work as muscle for them. What of it? The woman said as she scooted away from them. Do you know about what they're doing to the kids they take? Mason asked as he stepped up. It's best if you're honest with us. PFT, why wouldn't I be? Those bunch of fanatical assholes. I only work for them so I can get enough scratch to get the F out of here. Fanatical? Inko asked. The woman nodded. Yeah, the higher-ups all worship Nine like he's a god or something. Look, I couldn't give a shit about them. Like I said, I just want some cash. I heard about some quirk research facilities or something, but I haven't worked at any of them. A buddy of mine had told me about them, though, when he was running resources to a couple. I'll show you, and you let me go. Fair, right? Show us, Inko said as she tossed a map and pen to the woman. The duo watched the woman mark 2 spots on the map of Tokyo they'd given her. As she wrote it down, Mason wrote down in a notepad, and the moment the woman was done, Inko spoke. Thank you. Yeah, no problem dash. Inko's foot connected with the side of the woman's head, and she slumped over unconscious. You write the note? Yep, Mason said as he showed her. How's my writing? Like a toddler, Inko said as she put the note on the woman. But it'll work. Let's make some smoke and get out of here. A few minutes later, a hero spotted smoke rising from an alleyway and went to investigate, only to find an unconscious woman with a poorly written note attached saying how the woman worked for the Kingdom of Nine. The hero reported it as a vigilante attack and took the woman in for questioning. Mason took a deep breath and ignored the stench of the garbage behind him. He was feeling somewhat nervous now that they were so close to a potential target. They knew nothing about what it would be like inside, and they had no way of finding out more information short of just joining the Kingdom of Nine and hoping they got lucky enough to be posted in a quirk research facility. He really doubted Inko would sit around and do that. She had the heart and soul of a hero and was also a mother on a mission to save her son. Patience was something she was running low on. This is gonna be risky, Inko muttered as they looked at the office building across from them. Somewhere underneath the concrete structure was a lab full of children and assholes who were experimenting on them. We could pull back, Mason suggested. I can get in contact with my boss and see what support she can pull together for us. We might get lucky and get the Japanese government involved. This is happening in their country, after all. That'll take too long, Inko muttered. I spent months trekking across America to find Toshinori, and I've spent weeks with you just to learn my son is in Japan. I'm sick and tired of waiting. I want my boy back before any more harm can come to him. Mason chewed his lip before double-checking his gun and sighing. All right, let's go in then. I'll follow your lead. Inko nodded. Well, find the security room for the office building and secure it. After that, we'll head down the elevator that women told us about and take things slow. Mason nodded, and the two circled around and approached the building from another direction. Slipping in through a back door, Inko and Mason quickly realized that the building held no security at all. There were no cameras or guards of any kind. The entire building was empty. That's odd, Mason muttered as they headed for the elevator. Don't suppose the staircase goes all the way down, do you? Inko raised an eyebrow as she pushed the call button. Really? What? Mason asked as he shrugged. They have nothing up here, maybe they're overconfident or stupid. I doubt they're stupid, Inko said. They've survived and grown into a large crime organization. Even without All Might around, Japan still has a lower crime rate than any other country. As Mason spoke, the doors slid open, and the duo boarded the elevator. Probably because organized crime came back relatively recently to this country. They're all scrambling for power and kicking each other in the teeth to do it. Not like in America where they're all happy and secure in their territories. You poor boy. You must have it rough. Inko droned as she punched in the combo to take them down. Why don't you move here then? No thanks. I'm not a fan of Japanese food, and I can't make heads or tails of kanji. Mason said as the doors closed. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open. Mason and Inko pressed themselves into the corners closest to the door. Mason peeked around the corner, seeing a long hallway that split in either direction at the end. Inko pulled out a pocket mirror and checked directly above the elevator door. Neither one spotted any cameras. Mason looked at Inko and whispered. The lack of security is concerning. Then we better move quickly, Inko said as she moved into the hallway. Mason sighed and followed after her. The halls of the underground facility were stark white, and the whole thing smelled heavily of disinfectant. As they moved, Inko grabbed him suddenly and pulled him into a room. A few moments later, they heard people walking by. Mason felt some relief at the knowledge that they weren't just wandering an abandoned facility. He turned to look at the room they were in and felt confusion and disgust start to form in his gut. There were 5 vats full of liquid along the far wall. Each one was lit from below, showing large pitch-black skin things that were almost human-shaped submerged in the liquid. What the hell are those? Mason asked. I don't know, but they seem to be asleep. The people have moved on, so let's go. Inko said as she cracked the door open and checked to see if the coast was clear. The duo continued to move slowly, and as they worked their way deeper in, Mason felt more and more uneasy about the lack of security. There were no sensors or cameras that he could see, and there were very few people wandering the halls. Okay, I can't take this anymore, Mason said as he crouched and hid inside another lab full of what looked like torture equipment to him. Why is security so lax? It's almost like they're not scared of someone getting in or dash. Or they just won't let anyone who gets in get out, Inko said as a chill settled over both of them. Sensory quirks. F-. Mason muttered, we may be thoroughly F-ed right now. Won't matter. Let's try and find Mikumo. If he's not here, we try to find the sensory quirks and take them down, then escape. Mason took a deep breath to steady his breathing and calm his nerves. He'd been in plenty of sketchy and risky situations like this, and he'd managed to come out alive before. He just needed to keep a cool head and work with his partner. All right, let's find your kid. Before the duo could make much more progress into the facility, the lights turned red, and alarms blared as a voice called out. Quirk Research Facility 9 has experienced a critical failure and collapsed. All members move into lockdown procedures and cancel all experiments. Return subjects to their rooms and wait in your designated areas. Nomu is being activated. The F is a Nomu? Mason asked as he and Inko broke into a sprint. Don't know, don't care, Inko said as she rounded the corner before stopping and saying. Actually, I think those are Nomu. Mason stopped just behind Inko as 3 quadrupedal monsters crawled out of the nearby room. They looked more or less like the 5 that they saw by the entrance. Inko wasted no time pulling her gun out and firing a shot. The bullet tore through the creature's exposed brain, causing it to howl in pain. Mason felt his stomach drop into his stomach as he watched the damage repair itself. The 3 beasts turned their full attention on the 2 intruders, and as their muscles tensed, Mason said, "We need to run." Inko and Mason sprinted around the corner as the beast gave chase, and Inko cursed every god she could think of for this utter bullshit. She just wanted her son back, but the FS who took him apparently had seemingly immortal monsters running around the halls. As one of the beasts started to close the gap, Inko reached back and used her quirk to rip the monster's eyes out. The beast tripped over itself, knocking the other two over as well and giving the duo more time to get away. As they arrived at a three-way intersection, Mason cursed and started running down a path they hadn't taken yet. Inko realized pretty quickly why as three Nomu came barreling down the hallway towards them. "We need to get back to the elevator," Mason stated as he pulled out a magazine and clutched it tight in his hand. "I hope we can find it," Inko said as they rounded another corner with the Nomu hot on their heels. Mason tossed the glowing magazine back around the corner they had just rounded. The black powder in the bullets ignited due to the heat, and the bullets and shrapnel of the magazine tore through the Nomu, causing them to cry out in twisted cries of pain. As the duo ran and took turns, they did everything they could to stall the Nomu chasing them. Inko and Mason were running out of energy. Their quirks had been strained, and after several explosions, they were out of ammo for their guns. "It's the elevator," Mason said as he grabbed Inko and yanked her down the hall to the elevator. Inko grunted and quickly changed direction and slammed her hand onto the button. She thanked whatever god she could think of as the elevator actually worked. As they waited for the elevator, the howls of the approaching Nomu grew louder and louder. Mason muttered as the first Nomu rounded the corner and charged at them. Its eyes were ripped out of its head as Inko pulled a knife out from under her shirt. Mason didn't know she had that on her. Inko roared with rage as she charged the beast and stabbed its head repeatedly. The beast threw her off of itself easily and lunged for her, but Mason slammed his shoulder into the beast's head and smacked it against the wall. As the others started to grow closer, the doors opened, and Inko shouted, "Run!" Inko ripped the Nomu's eyes out again and attempted to run for the elevator. She was 2 steps behind Mason, and as the man entered, Inko felt something tear through her leg. Inko screamed as she fell and looked back to see the Nomu's tongue had turned metallic and shot down the hall, stabbing through Inko's calf. "Inko!" Mason shouted as the doors to the elevator shut. Mason smashed the buttons on the elevator after it came to a stop, but nothing worked. The code to go back down wasn't working. "DMN it." Mason exited the elevator and punched the closest wall as his anger bubbled over. Footsteps cut through his emotions, and the US agent quickly fled from the building and returned to the hotel that he and Inko had been using as their base of operations. As Mason entered the room, he pulled his phone out. He needed backup, and he needed it as soon as possible. The phone rang twice before the voice of his boss spoke. "Mason, what's the situation?" "Bad," Mason said as he slumped into a seat. "I'm sorry to say, but Inko Akatani has been captured by those who stole her child. I need backup immediately. I know where she is. If we could get some Japanese heroes to come in dash." "Mason," a masculine voice cut in. Mason recognized it immediately as the voice of the director. Mason sat up as he said, "Sir? Why are you on this call?" "I was coming down to speak to Jessica about your operation." Mason did not like how unhappy he sounded. "It was going well, but we ran into a sticky situation and dash." "I don't need an explanation," the man said, cutting him off again. "Come back home. Your operation is a failure and there are other things that your skills are needed for." "Wah, but sir, we can still dash." "But nothing," the man said. "You reassured us that bringing Inko Akatani along with you would be a good thing, and now not only have you been unable to find her son, you've also lost her as well. This operation has taken too long and caused us to lose more of the people we were supposed to protect. You're done. After some time off, you will continue on with other operations." "Sir Dash. Do not make me send someone to collect you, Mason. You're a good agent, but you aren't perfect. You made a bad call, and it blew up in your face. Come back home, lick your wounds, and get back to work." Mason grit his teeth as he nearly broke his phone. "Understood, sir." Once his higher-ups had hung up, Mason hunched in on himself as he let out a shuddering breath and held back his tears. Frustration and anger swirled and mixed as he lamented his decision-making. He had bent to Inko's will to keep her from flying off the handle, and it had circled around and bit him in the butt as they pushed in too far past what they knew and landed into a situation they couldn't handle. Mason shuddered as his anger fizzled out and a cold, empty feeling of failure settled over him. He screwed up and failed miserably. Everything hurt. Her hand was swimming, and her leg felt like it was on fire. Something was digging into her shoulders. As Inko's eyes opened, she realized quickly that 2 Nomu were digging their teeth into her shoulders and holding her down against the ground. Inko groaned and made no attempt to struggle. She considered it a miracle that the creatures didn't just kill her, but she felt like that kindness was not guaranteed if she put up any resistance. Laughter caused Inko to strain as she looked up at the short, portly man in a doctor's coat. The old man stroked his mustache for a moment before saying, "This is quite a surprise. To think one of my old master's killers would appear before me so suddenly. How have you been, Inko Akatani? Or should I call you Karakawaguchi? Or perhaps you've taken another name. Call me ma'am, you disgusting a-hole, Inko grumbled. Garaki laughed and patted a Nomo's head as he said. Such fire. Tell me, how do you like my Nomo? Ferocious, aren't they? They're gross, Inko muttered and held back a scream of pain as the Nomo dug into her shoulders. It seems they don't like what you said, Garaki said with a chuckle. These creatures are not as great as I'd like them to be, but they serve their purpose. My new master doesn't care much for advancing them, but he helped me ensure they would be strong enough. Garaki sighed as his head dropped. Though the genetic limitations do slow us down on making more. Genetic? Inko asked, hoping to buy time for something to happen that may lead to her actually surviving this. Interested? Wonderful to hear. Garaki said as he smiled and straightened up. Not just any old corpse will work for the base of a Nomu. There are certain genetic markers that will allow a corpse to handle the physical changes and quirk modifications that the corpse will undergo. Garaki's smile turned cruel as he looked down at the woman. Thanks to the months your son spent in Facility 9, I know your family has the genetic markers required to become Nomu. Inko felt relief overshadow the fear she felt seeing Garaki's cruel smile. Her son was at the facility that had fallen. There was a good chance the heroes had attacked, and she chose to believe Mikumo was alive and well. Garaki pulled a device from his pocket as he said. I may have lost your son, but you will do. Let's see what kind of Nomu I can make out of you. You okay? You look like you're gonna throw up. Hestia said as she floated around Himiko's shoulders. I'm fine, Himiko said as she fidgeted with the ribbon around her neck. I'm just nervous. Public school isn't anything to fret about, Mamiko said as she tousled Himiko's hair making the girl swat at her. Just be yourself, and you'll be okay, but don't be afraid to speak up if someone gives you trouble. Ainen and I are your legal guardians, so we'll take care of you no matter what. Why yeah, I know. I'll do my best, Himiko said as she blushed. Good, Mamiko said as she sat at the dining table. Also, don't forget your gum. Are your cravings okay? Has anything changed recently? No. Everything is okay. Himiko said as the others started to eat breakfast. I also already put the gum in my bag. Your teachers should already know about it, but just show them the note if anyone gives you trouble. I think she'll be okay, Ainen said as she patted her friend's shoulder. Ease up, okay? I'm worried, Mamiko said as she leaned toward Ainen. Himi is going to public school, you know what that's like. I thought you said it was anything to fret about, Himiko said as she started to grow concerned. It isn't, Ainen said as she shoved Mamiko out of her personal space. She's being dramatic. The junior high that we went to was a little rough, but the one we signed you up for is a good place, so you'll be okay, Himiko. I think you'll do great, Izuku said as he finished his breakfast. And next year, when I start, you can show me around and help me out. Yeah, I can, Himiko said as she smiled at her younger brother. I'm sure it'll be okay. It won't be unless you finish your breakfast and get going soon, Mamiko said as she pointed her chopsticks at the blonde girl. You'll be late if you lollygag. Ha! Himiko said as she looked at the time. Hestia giggled as Himiko quickly tore into her breakfast before putting her dishes away and dashing out the door while saying goodbye. Himiko fidgeted as she stood outside her classroom. Her nerves tingled as the teacher told her to come in, and Himiko stepped up in front of a classroom full of kids her own age. A few looked bored and uninterested in her presence, while others commented on how she looked. Memories of the facility started to crawl from the depths of her mind, but she quickly shoved them down deep. School was not going to be like that hellhole. I'm Himiko Toga. I was homeschooled until recently, so I'll be in your care, and I hope we can get along. A few students murmured amongst themselves as the teacher directed Himiko to the empty seat near the back. Himiko quickly made her way to her seat and took note of the tall blonde girl sitting next to her. As the girl gave a friendly wave, Himiko nervously returned the gesture and noted that her nails were all a different color with black hearts. After classes wrapped up and lunch was starting, a serious-looking guy with red hair walked up to Himiko and said, Toga, my name is Niwa Tashiki, the class rep. I'll show you around the school, and if you need anything, don't be afraid to ask me. Before Himiko could say anything, the blonde next to her spoke up. Oh, come on, watch on, you're such a busybody. Why not let me do it? I think your student body president vibe is gonna scare her. The boy blushed and grit his teeth as he looked at the girl. Atsushimi, how often do I have to tell you not to call me that? Kami shrugged as she smiled. I don't know, I usually tune you out when you start getting all lecturary. Anyways, girl, my name is Kami Atsushimi, but my last name is totes a mouthful, so just call me Kami or Shimi-chan if you want. Okay. Shimi-chan. It's nice to meet you. Himiko said as she looked at the girl's nails again. I like your nails. They're cute. For real? Thankies, I got inspired after reading the latest issue of Iwabami's fashion magazine. Niwa sighed and said. Please be sure to show her around Utsushimi. Yeah, I will, boss man. Don't fret, I got this on lock. Niwa stared at her for a moment before walking off silently. Kami chuckled and turned back to Himiko. Come on, I'll show you the cafeteria first. We can have some lunch before checking out the other hot spots. That sounds good, Himiko said as she got up and followed the taller girl out of the classroom. As she listened to Kami talk, Himiko smiled. She felt like she could get along with this girl. Are you sure about this? Himiko asked as she looked at herself in the mirror in Kami's room. Kami had been talking about clothes she didn't wear anymore at school, and when Himiko mentioned she was interested in fashion as well, the taller girl had practically dragged Himiko to her house and was tossing outfits at her. Currently, Himiko was wearing a black skirt and an oversized red sweater Kami had given her. Kami nodded as she painted her nails a dark blue. Yeah, for sure, girl. I'm not gonna wear them, and you look so good in red. Oh, I got some polish that could go with that. You want me to paint them? You're not gonna go crazy like you do on your own, are you? Himiko asked as she sat down across from her friend. Chill, fam, I'll give you something simple, promise, Kami said as she finished up her own nails. Once this coat is dry, I'll do yours. Sounds good, Himiko said as she tapped her fingers and stared at Kami's nails. After a moment of silence started to stretch, she spoke up. You know next week's issue of Iwabami's fashion magazine is gonna have some interesting designs in it. Maybe you'll get some more inspiration. Oh, how do you know what's gonna be in there? Kami asked as she resisted the urge to tap her nails against the table. She loved the sound they made, but she was gonna be trying a complicated design, and she did not want to mess it up. Mom, she works for the magazine, Himiko said as she tried not to shuffle in place. She was telling me about what they would be doing last night. What, your mom works for Iwabami? No cap? Kami asked as her eyes got wide. Yeah. It's nothing special, really, I promise. Himiko said, feeling a little bad about not being 100% truthful. She just works for the magazine and stuff. That's crazy. I'm so jelly of you. Oh, is that how you got into fashion? Himiko nodded and started talking about how she had seen Mamiko working on designs when she was younger and how it had got her interest. A couple hours later, Himiko said bye to Kami and went home with a new outfit and nails painted black with simple red hearts on each nail. So this is your place? Kami asked as they stood outside Mamiko's apartment. Yes. Kind of. Himiko said before pointing to another door. That's also kind of my place as well. What? You're losing me here, girl. Kami said as she looked down at Himiko. Okay, so this is kinda complicated, but I have two moms. Oh no biggie, that don't bother me, Kami said, giving a thumbs up. Girls, boys, and everything in between and around is cool in my book. Love who you love and all that jazz. What? No, they're not married. Himiko said as she opened the door. They're not even dating, they're just friends. Like in a historical way or? In a friendly way, Himiko said as she rolled her eyes. They're friends, and they're both my legal guardians. I live in this apartment with Mamiko, while my little brother and sister live in the other apartment with Ainen. Oh. Why don't you just, live together in a bigger place? Kami asked as she entered the apartment. Because they can't stand living together, Himiko said. Apparently, they tried it at one point, and Ainen nearly smothered Mamiko in her sleep. Wow, that's intense, Kami said as she took her shoes off and followed Himiko. So where's Mama Toga? Is she still working? Himiko nodded. Why yeah. Her birthday is coming up, and I want to make something for her, so I need you to taste test for me. We can also study for the exam that's coming up. Kami stopped and started Himiko for a moment before chuckling. Haha, that's funny. We don't have an exam coming up. Why yes, we do, Himiko said as she looked at her friend with concern. Oh DMN, you're serious, Kami said as the realization dawned on her. Himi, you gotta help me study. Himiko chuckled as she patted her friend's shoulder. Taste the food, and I'll make sure you don't fail. Kami nodded and put her hands together as she said. I'll eat whatever you give me. I cannot afford to bomb this test. My folks have been on me recently, and my allowance is at stake here. It's nice to meet you, Hestia said, startling Kami, who had just taken her shoes off. Himi-chan? Sorry, this is my little sister Hestia, she's Izuku's quirk, Himiko said as she accepted Hestia's hug. Your little sister is your little brother's quirk? Fam, I'm gonna be 100 with you, that doesn't make sense. Kami said as she looked at Hestia float in front of her and pout. But nice to meet ya. I'm Kami Utsushimi, but you can call me Kami or Shimi-chan. Okay Shimi-chan, I'm Hestia. It's nice to meet you. Oh, I like your nails, they're so pretty. Thanks, Kami said as they walked into the living room and found Izuku working on homework. Izuku got up and smiled as he said, "Hello, I'm Izuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for taking care of Hime at school." Himiko pouted as Kami chuckled. "She does not take care of me. It's no problem for real. Nice to meet you too," Kami said as she did her best not to focus on his missing arm. "Oh, Izuku, let Kami paint your nails," Hestia said as she wrapped around her host. "Please, I think hers are pretty, and you'd look good with it." "Huh? I don't want my nails painted," Izuku said as he looked at Hestia like she was crazy. "Oh, think it over, fam. Besides, even if you wanted to, I don't have any nail polish on me," Kami said as she walked over. "I agree with Hestia," Himiko said as she joined them. "You'd look adorable, Izuku." Izuku pouted as Hestia giggled and hugged him. The quirk smiled and said, "So why are you two here?" "I wanted to introduce Kami to you too," Himiko said. "I figured we could hang out for a bit, but I see Izuku's doing homework." "Yeah, but we just finished," Hestia said as she quickly floated over and grabbed Himiko's hand. "So let's play games and stuff." Himiko chuckled and patted Hestia's head as she said, all right, let's play some games. Are you ready?" Himiko asked as she looked at Izuku. "Why yeah, I am," Izuku said as he smiled. Hestia formed out of Izuku's back and propped herself up on his head. "He's super nervous, but I'm not. Though I wish I could wear a uniform too. It would fall off of you whenever you go into Izuku, and besides, you're not supposed to come out during school. Using quirks is not allowed on campus," Himiko said as she patted Hestia's head. Hestia pouted as they started walking. "That's stupid. I'm not like other quirks, I should be allowed to show myself. I want to see what school is like." "Don't you get Izuku's memories? Or hear his thoughts?" "No," Hestia said. "I get his feelings, and the only time I was able to remember his thoughts and memories was when I first formed." "Oh, right," Himiko said as she smiled at her little sister. "Still, please don't cause Izuku any problems." Hestia pouted as she hugged Izuku. "I'd never do that." "I know you wouldn't, Hestia." "Thank you," Izuku said as he patted his quirk's head. After an uneventful walk to school, Himiko showed Izuku where his shoe locker was and how to get to the first year's classes before going their separate ways. As Izuku walked, he did his best to ignore the looks he was getting. His moms and sister had told him time and time again how his missing arm was not something to feel ashamed of, and he wasn't because he may have lost an arm, but he gained a quirk who loved him. It was still uncomfortable having so many people look at him or, more precisely, where his arm used to be. Izuku entered his classroom and found his seat quickly as he walked to his desk. He did his best to ignore the murmurs and looks. It was the first time in years since Izuku was surrounded by his peers. The last time being. Izuku shoved the thoughts of the facility away from his mind. The teacher came in after the bell rang and introduced herself before asking each of the students to do the same. When Izuku's turn came around, he stood and said, "Hello, I'm Izuku Midoriya, and it's Dash. And I'm Hestia." Hestia shouted as she sprouted from his back, startling everyone. Izuku stared up in horror as Hestia waved happily. His teacher recovered quickly and said, "Midoriya, I am sure you know the rules. You cannot use your quirk on school grounds." "I'm so sorry, ma'am," Izuku said as he mentally pulled Hestia back to him. "She's very excited to be coming to school. I told her to not come out but Dash. I'll go back, don't worry, teach. I just wanted everyone to know about me," Hestia said as she grinned at the frazzled teacher. "I'm Hestia, a sentient quirk. I protect Izuku, so if you try to beat him up, I'll beat you up." Izuku blushed and rubbed his face as Hestia said bye and slipped back into him. "I'm very sorry for her behavior. I promise she won't beat anyone up." "Gee good," his teacher said as she adjusted her glasses. "Now, if you'll have a seat, we can continue." As the rest of the class introduced themselves, Izuku tried not to look at anyone, but his eyes landed on a tall, dark-haired girl as she stood and spoke firmly and with a cold distance. "I'm Momo Yayorozu. I look forward to this year. I hope we can all learn together." Izuku tensed as Momo noticed him and quickly looked away with a perturbed look on her face. She did not seem happy to be here. Izuku frowned as he hoped that he would be able to make friends at school. His worries lessened a little as he felt Hestia's warmth radiating from his chest. Even if things didn't go smoothly, he would always have her. Momo tried not to huff as she ate her bento in the cafeteria. She had to argue with the family chef for nearly an hour until he relented and allowed her to make and pack her own lunches. School was already going to be bad enough. She didn't need everyone gawking at a lunch that cost more than their weekly groceries. Momo glanced around the cafeteria, noting the few people who looked at her and whispered amongst themselves. Momo huffed as she picked at her rice and thought, wonderful, it's starting. Momo didn't want to be here. She didn't want to go to public school anymore. The elementary school she attended was a private school, but she was still a Yaoyorozu. Her family stood out even amongst the rich and powerful. Kids back then would be friends with her because of their parents' influence or their own budding greed. Junior high would only get worse. Momo chewed the slightly burnt tamagoyaki she had made and thought about how much better it would be if she could just be homeschooled until high school. Then she could go to UA and become a hero like she wants to. The kids who managed to get into UA would be too focused on being heroes and would have the right mindset. They wouldn't try and worm their way into Momo's wallet. Yes, being homeschooled till then would have worked out wonderfully, but her parents had a different idea. They supported her dream and decided to take steps to ensure she would succeed, such as sending her to a public school so she could better understand the common person she'd be saving as a hero. Momo found the idea to be ridiculous. She didn't need to suffer through people lying to her face to understand that people would say or do almost anything to get what they wanted. The clatter of a tray landing on the spot in front of her startled Momo. The dark-haired girl looked up and saw a small sea of freckles with two emerald eyes partly obscured by curly dark green hair. She recognized him immediately as her classmate Izuku Midoriya. Her eyes flicked to his arm as she thought. Is he going to be the first to try and get what he wants? Mind if I sit here? Izuku asked as he smiled at her. Momo wanted to scowl, but she was a Yaoyorozu. She was raised better than to let people see her displeasure, especially in public. Momo kept a blank expression as she gestured and said, "The seat isn't taken." That's not really an answer, is it? Momo's eye twitched, and she bit back a sigh. Yes, you can sit there. Izuku grinned as he sat down and thanked her. Momo turned her attention back to her lunch when he didn't immediately vomit out a slew of thinly veiled compliments meant to lower her guard. The lunch PRD ticked on, and Momo kept her vision firmly on her lunch as Izuku ate and checked his phone. Momo did a double take when she saw the glowing hand holding his phone as he used his real hand to eat. Izuku spotted her looking and smiled as he leaned back a bit, revealing his quirk, Hestia, if Momo was remembering right, coming out of his stomach. Don't tell anyone, but she was going stir-crazy, so I'm letting her out to check Twitter and stuff. Momo watched the arm dip below the table before Hestia poked her head out. Hi, nice to meet you. Likewise, Momo said, somewhat taken aback by the sight in front of her. Izuku took another bite of rice, and Momo noticed a flash of color. His nails were painted a dark green. Izuku noticed her staring and chuckled as his cheeks warmed. My big sis is getting into nail work and stuff. She's still a beginner, but her bestie is encouraging her a lot, which means she wants to practice. I volunteered since she kept bothering me about it. They suit you, Momo stated before glancing at his arm again. She chastised herself when his smile shifted. I'm sorry. It's okay, Izuku stated, moving his stump a little. I lost it when I was 6, and I'm not really bothered by it anymore. When I lost it, a lot of things in my life changed, so I didn't process it. The years after were hard, but I got past them, and besides, if I ever really need help, I've got Hestia to lend me 2 hands. Dang right, you do, Hestia said from under the table. I see. Momo muttered before finishing off her rice. The conversation lapsed, and before she knew it, the bell rang, and it was back to class. Momo was very confused. A few weeks had passed, and while she had rebuffed some advances from her schoolmates and was working on getting a few more to take the very kind and gentle hints she was giving to leave her alone, Izuku was not among them. The boy said hello to her when they saw each other and occasionally sat across from her at lunch and would make small talk about heroes or things they had done in class. He never tried to get anything from her or trick her into offering something. He just existed near her and smiled whenever she looked at him. It was very off-putting, all things considered. Momo frowned as she watched the boy. He wasn't a social butterfly by any means, but he could hold a conversation and would approach people on occasion. He seemed to get along with just about anyone, and even those he didn't converse with regularly showed no signs of hostility. As far as she could tell, he was just a normal guy who was a bit more obsessed with heroes than most kids their age. Maybe he wants to be a hero. Momo thought as she collected her bento and made her way to the cafeteria. She knew sitting somewhere isolated would reduce the chance of people approaching her, but she didn't want to risk finding a nice spot only for greedy schoolmates to spoil it by loitering around, waiting for the rich girl to show up. As Momo took her regular spot near the back of the cafeteria, Izuku was shortly behind, and as he approached, he asked, "Can I sit here?" "You ask me every time," Momo said before she could stop herself. "In case you don't want company," Izuku said as he stood there waiting. Momo sighed. You can sit here and thank you, I suppose, for being considerate, but why? Why am I considerate or? Izuku said as he tilted his head and sat down. Momo cleared her throat as embarrassment crept up her neck. She really was off-kilter around this guy. Why would you wonder if I wanted company or not? Oh well, you didn't seem very happy on the first day of school, and then the next day at lunch, you also looked pretty upset, Izuku said as he separated his chopsticks. I figured having some company may help you feel better, but I also get not wanting to have anyone else around. Solitude can be what people need at times. Are you ever really alone? Momo asked, again forgetting to filter her thoughts. Izuku chuckled as he poked at his lunch. Yep. Hestia can't read my mind or anything like that, and if I ask, she can go back inside my body. I'm not totally sure what it's like for her because she struggles to explain it, but she seems happy with her own alone time, so it all works out. I see, Momo stated before letting the silence start to creep in. Before it could get too far, Izuku spoke up. I might be wrong, and I'm really sorry for making assumptions, but are you having some issues with our classmates? Momo tensed and looked at him warily as she asked. Why do you ask? Well, you don't talk to many people here, and you never seem happy after talking to someone. Izuku looked away from her, and she got the feeling he was hiding something. What else? Huh? Izuku asked as he looked at her before quickly looking away. That's it. No, it isn't, Momo said as she narrowed her eyes. You've got something else about this that bothers you. Izuku withered quickly under the gaze and broke with a sigh. I overheard some kids from another class complaining that they couldn't get anything out of the rich girl. I remember seeing them talking to you earlier that day. Sorry, I didn't mean to snoop or anything. Momo stared at the strange boy in front of her. He seemed to be a genuine and kind person, and he hadn't tried to get anything out of her. Momo frowned and thought about her plans and how she'd deal with him if she turned out to be wrong. Do you want to be a hero when you grow up? Momo asked, causing Izuku to stare at her in confusion. This will make sense, just please answer. Okay. And yeah, I do. Izuku smiled as he sat up a little straighter. Heroes saved my life when this happened. Momo glanced at his missing right arm and yet again found herself wondering what happened. After being saved by them, I decided I wanted to be a hero too so that I can help kids like me. Izuku smiled brighter as Hestia poked her head out of his chest. Hestia is in agreement with me, so we're gonna go to UA and become awesome heroes. Heck yeah, we are, Hestia said as she grinned up at her host. Momo hummed and, after a moment, came to a decision. I want to be a hero as well. UA is my school of choice. Oh, sweet. I know it's a few years away, but I hope we can both get in. Izuku said with another one of his signature grins. Momo couldn't help but marvel at how genuinely happy he seemed whenever he smiled. There was no calculation or subterfuge to his expressions. Izuku seemed to simply feel an emotion and display it. Yes, I hope so as well, Momo said as she set her chopsticks down. As for what you said before, I am from the Yoiorozu family. Those people you overheard are a few of many who seek to get on my good side for the sole purpose of getting something from me, whether it be money, entertainment, or social status. What they want doesn't really matter. I turn everyone away once their true motives show themselves. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Izuku said, and Momo was struck by the genuine hurt on his face. It must suck to be unable to tell if someone is actually trying to be friends with you or if they're just using you. Well, yes, I suppose it does. I hope I don't come across like that. I'm sorry if I do. Momo stared at the boy for what was starting to feel like an uncomfortable amount of time. You are an odd person, Midoriya. Izuku chuckled nervously as he rubbed the back of his head. Well, I was homeschooled until this year, and my only friends are my big sister and Hestia, so I'm not used to this whole socializing with kids my own age thing. Momo hummed in thought, but before she could form her next statement Izuku spoke up. You mentioned your family name Yaoyorozu, and now that I'm thinking about it. It sounds familiar, but I can't place it. Momo sighed and decided to consider this another test. Izuku was toppling her notions one after another, but everyone had some kind of selfish angle. She just needed to find his. Since he wanted to be a hero, it would probably be support items. It's because my family is Yaoyorozu, as in the Yaoyorozu Support Company. We mainly make support gear for heroes and first responders. Izuku snapped his fingers as he grinned. That's right. I remember now. I'm always really impressed with the stuff they make. I don't know why I didn't notice that sooner. Yes, I am quite proud of my family's business as well. It's very successful. Oh, I'm sure, but I'm more impressed by how many people you guys help. Momo looked up at him, surprised as he kept speaking. The gear you make is used by so many heroes, and it's so useful to them. The first responder gear and even the stuff you release for public use are all so reliable, and I've heard it's very user-friendly, which is important during an emergency. Actually, I think there's a Yaoyuzu first aid kit in my kitchen. Momo wanted to interrupt him, but she wasn't sure what to say, and he just kept talking about how good her family's products were and the heroes who used them. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore. Thank you, Midoriya. Izuku was startled out of his ramblings and blushed as he chuckled. I was rambling, wasn't I? I'm sorry, I just get so excited about heroes and stuff. I see that, Momo said as she smiled. I enjoy speaking about them as well, but I'm afraid neither of us will finish our lunch if we talk about them. Izuku looked at the clock nearby and gasped. Oh gosh, we're almost out of time. We need to finish up quickly. Momo sighed and ate her lunch as quickly as she could while still remaining dignified. As the bell rang and the two students started heading back to their classroom, Izuku said, hopefully, we can hang out and have some time to talk about heroes. I'd like to hear your thoughts about them. Momo stopped at her desk and considered the boy for a moment yet again. He consistently dashed her expectations and presented nothing but a kind and caring personality. He was a warm person and seemed to just want to get along with anyone he talked to. Maybe he'll be different from everyone else. Momo thought as she grabbed her chair. An unsure smile spread across her face as she decided to take a risk. I would like to as well. Perhaps after school, we can speak about them. Izuku lit up like a fireworks display as he stepped over to his desk. Sounds awesome. Momo felt very nervous. The end of their first semester was closing in on them, and as such, students were scrambling to study. Neither the test themselves nor the studying Momo planned to do were what was making her nervous. Instead, the things causing her nerves to flare up and twist her stomach into knots were the apartment door in front of her and her best and only friend next to her. She had never gone to a friend's house to study. Heck, she hadn't really studied with anyone else before. Izuku hummed as he unlocked the door and stepped in as he called out, I'm home. Momo was surprised by the action. She had never said something like that when she came home. For one thing, her house was huge, and she'd have to yell quite loudly for anyone to hear her if they weren't in the nearby rooms, and for another, a maid was always there to greet her first and take her things for her. Come on in. I think Mom's still at work. Izuku said as he kicked his shoes off. Pardon the intrusion, Momo muttered as she entered quickly and followed a few steps behind her friend. What does your mother do? Momo asked as they deposited their bags on the dining table. She's a model. She works exclusively for Iwabumi's fashion magazine. Izuku said quickly. It had been decided for Himiko and Izuku's safety to simply omit the hero work that Ainen and Mamiko did from any conversation about the kids' parents. I have heard good things about her company, Momo stated as she looked around the small apartment. The joint kitchen and living room were wonderful to her. She never would have thought you could have 2 rooms in a space equal to her closet. Before Izuku could launch into what Momo was sure would be a very informative breakdown of the company and the hero who headed it, a blonde girl sauntered into the room dressed in a baggy dark red hoodie and black shorts. Her hair was still a bit damp and, as such, was down. Himiko? Izuku said as he titled his head. I thought you were at Mamiko's apartment. Himiko huffed as she crossed her arms. I don't want anything to do with Mom right now. She's so suffocating sometimes. I'm staying here until she chills out. Momo was surprised by the exacerbated sigh that Izuku let out as his shoulders slumped and mumbled. Not again. So, is this the girl you were talking about, Izuku? Your new best friend. Momo looked at the girl as she grinned and ruffled Izuku's hair. Her golden cat eyes were full of mischief, and her smile showed off a set of very sharp-looking canines. Momo tensed as the girl turned her attention to her, and too late did Momo realize she'd been caught staring. Himiko's smile shifted a little as she said, I'm Himiko Toga, Izuku's big sister. It's nice to finally meet you, Yaoyorozu. Thanks for being friends with Aizu. It's no problem. Momo stammered out as she suddenly felt very nervous under the older girl's gaze. He's a lot of fun to hang out with, and Hestia is wonderful as well, of course. The quirk grinned and puffed out her chest as Himiko reached over and patted her head. Yes, she's pretty cool. So what are you two doing here? Studying for finals, Izuku said, causing Himiko to groan and slump over. I don't want to think about that right now. Himiko's moping was cut short as her phone chimed, and she smiled. Oh, it's Kami. Hey Izuku, if Mom asks, tell her I'm here. Once Ainen gets home, tell her what happened before Mom can show up. Izuku sighed as he watched his sister go. I want some donuts as payment. Himiko chuckled as she slipped her shoes on. You're the best little brother ever. Once Himiko was gone, Momo turned to Izuku and asked the first thing that was on her mind. You lie to your parents? Izuku blushed as he looked around nervously and chuckled. I wouldn't say lie. We just inform them of different things at different times. Like if mom comes home and hears from Mamiko that Himiko is supposed to be here but she's not, then mom freaks out, and Himi may get in trouble, but if before that can happen, I tell mom about the fight and how Himi is with Kami, then mom will be calm and will help to work out whatever came up to cause Himi and Mamiko to fight. I see, Momo said as she took a seat at the table. Also, I know this may be prying, but you and your sister have last names. You also refer to different people as mom. Oh yeah? Izuku said as he looked away from her. I'm sorry if I broached an uncomfortable topic, Momo said, not wanting to cause her friend any distress. She wasn't really sure what was appropriate for the two of them to discuss. No, it's a little complicated, and it sounds weird to explain. Izuku said as he sighed and rubbed his neck. Do you want some tea? I'll make it while I explain. Though I don't have anything as fancy as what you've talked about. Oh, that's quite all right. I firmly believe every tea has its good qualities. Momo said as she smiled. Izuku chuckled and walked over to the eclectic kettle and started heating the water. Okay, so there are two women named Mamiko and Ainen. They're best friends and the legal guardians of Himiko, and Himiko lives with Mamiko, and I live with Ainen. Apparently, the last time they tried to live together didn't end well, and Mamiko says she may have tried to kill Ainen in her sleep. Surely she was joking, Momo said as she held a hand to her chest. I don't think she was, Izuku muttered. Anyway, Mamiko lives a few doors down. Over the years of living with them, I started calling Ainen mom, and Himi did the same to Mamiko. I do consider both of them my mom, though it's just that. I don't know, I just don't feel like mom fits Mamiko. I see. Perhaps another name would be better for her. Not that referring to her as Mamiko is a bad thing. I'm sure she doesn't mind either way. Momo watched as Izuku put tea bags into 2 cups and poured the water over them. She had never actually had tea from a bag before. This, along with studying at a friend's place and a personal talk about family, was making this trip a very lucrative one in terms of first times. She's told me before that she doesn't mind. I don't really think about it much. Izuku said before placing the cups down. I have honey or sugar if you want. Thank you, but I don't tend to put anything in my tea. The two friends settled down at the table and began their study session, both feeling quite happy about how their friendship had been going. Yayorozu? Momo stopped in her tracks and turned to see Himiko. She'd interacted with the older girl a few times, and every time she saw her, she felt a weird sort of flutter in her chest. Oh, hello, Toga. How are you? I'm doing good. What about you? Off to lunch? Himiko asked as she walked up. Momo nodded. Yes, Izuku is helping the other guys in our class with some operation, I believe they called it. I'm not entirely sure what's going on. Himiko shrugged as she said. Who knows what guys get up to? Hopefully, Aizu doesn't get in trouble. You alone for lunch then? Momo nodded and tensed when Himiko slipped her arm around hers. Well, you don't have to be. My friend Kami and I are gonna eat on the roof. Why don't you join us? Oh okay, that sounds nice. Thank you for offering. Don't worry about it. I've been wanting to hang out with you some more anyways. Himiko said as she led Momo to the stairs. I think we'll get along great, and I am sure you'll enjoy Kami. It didn't take long to get up to the roof, and as they entered, an energetic voice called out. Himi. What took you so long? Sorry Cam, I found a friend and wanted to bring her along. This is Momo Yayorozu. Oof, that's a mouthful, Kami said as she stood up and practically bounced over. Kami Utsushimi, but that's a mouthful as well, so call me Kami or Shimi-chan. Mind if I call you Yamamo? Okay. Shimi-chan. That seems fine. Momo said, feeling a little unprepared for the blonde's energy. Awesome. Kami beamed as she headed back to her lunch. Come on, sit and chat. I totes want to know how you and Himi know each other. She's not a social butterfly most of the time. Himiko blushed as she took a seat and said. I am totally social. I just prefer hanging out with you over everyone else in class. Himi, you're gonna make my heart go all doki doki, Kami said as she held a hand up to her chest. Momo sat and took in the interaction feeling a little out of place, partially due to her being a year younger than them and partially due to how close they seemed. She silently wished Izuku was here or something to help make this feel less awkward for her. Kami turned, and Momo's thoughts stalled a bit as the blonde's dark brown eyes shimmered with barely contained curiosity. So, how do you know Himi? Momo took a moment to recollect herself before telling the older girls how she had become friends with Izuku and how it led to her meeting Himiko a few times. Kami was stoked that Momo was friends with Izuku, and as the conversation over lunch continued, Momo relaxed and felt herself being pulled into the fold. The two girls were interested in fashion, which Momo knew a bit about, primarily due to her family's business. Looking good was a crucial part of support gear. No one wanted heroes running around with big ugly equipment when they could have something that matched their aesthetic and function just as well. By the time the bell rang, Momo felt slightly disappointed that they would have to go their separate ways. That was until Cammy pulled her phone out and said, "Oh, give me your info, Yamamo. I want to make a group chat for the three of us so we can hang again. You're so chill and fun to talk with, so I know we'll have a blast." Oh, sure, of course," Momo said as she quickly pulled her phone out and traded info with Himiko and Cammy. "Awesome. I'll text you later, so peace," Cammy said before disappearing down the stairs. Himiko just shook her head and said bye to Momo before going the same way as her friend. By the time Momo got back to her classroom, she still couldn't stop smiling, though the disheveled look Izuku had now was concerning. Several of the boys, in fact, looked like they'd been thrown into bushes. She decided to just wait until after school to ask about what he had gotten up to. "Hey, Himi, so this is what you've been up to," Izuku said as he stared at his best friend, who looked like a child who got caught sneaking candy. Momo was sitting in Mamiko's living room with Cammy and Himiko with an array of nail polishes and various small decorations, as well as a few fashion magazines on the table. Momo blushed and stuttered. "Well, I told you I was hanging out with friends today, and you should know that Shimi-chan and Toga are my only other friends." Izuku chuckled as he shook his head. "Yeah, I figured. Himiko, do you have that manga I lent you?" Hestia is pouting because she wants to read it. "I am not," Hestia said as she popped out of his shoulder. "I just said I wanted to read it." Himiko chuckled and said, "It's on the top shelf of my bookshelf. I'm sorry for holding onto it for so long, Hestia." The quirk had already darted into Himiko's room and retrieved the manga. "Thanks, Himi." "You're welcome," Himiko said as she let Cammy continue to work on her nails. Hestia practically dragged Izuku out so that she could get to reading. Once they were gone, Himiko looked over at her two closest friends as they talked about something in one of the magazines. "Hey, I got something I want to tell you too." Cammy and Momo looked over, and Himiko swallowed a lump in her throat as her nerves started to tingle. Her life was surrounded by hero talk. Both her parents are heroes, her little brother wants to be a hero, and her two closest friends want to be heroes, but she. "I don't want to be a hero," Himiko said as she closed her eyes and waited for the worst. "Huh?" Cammy said as she tilted her head. "Are we supposed to be surprised?" What? Himiko asked as she opened her eyes and looked at the confused faces of her friends. Momo sighed and rubbed her eyes as she said, "I think Shimi-chan means that we're not surprised. I think it was pretty obvious to us that you weren't interested in pursuing heroics like we are. I am curious about what you want to do, though." Himiko stared at Momo for a moment before looking at Cammy, who nodded. "That's sure what I meant. Yamamo is so smart it's low-key scary." I don't know." Himiko stared at the table and clenched her fist as relief started to fill her soul. I haven't told anyone, and I'm not sure how Ainen or Mom or even Izuku would take it." Cammy snorted as Momo sighed. The former of the two girls chuckled and said, "Girl, you're worrying over nothing. Ya fam is the chillest bunch I've ever met. Sure, it was mega crazy when I realized your mom was Uwabami, but I doubt they'd have beef with your decision, trust me. Right, ya Momo?" Momo nodded. "Yes, I agree with Shimi-chan. Your family loves you, Toga. They're not going to have any issues with your decision not to go into heroics. I'm sure they'll support whatever you want to do." Himiko chuckled as tears pricked her eyes. She quickly did her best to wipe them away while not messing up her nails, which were still drying. "Thank you, too. I needed to hear that. I'll be sure to tell my family at dinner." "Go for it, girl, and if it goes south, we'll crash at Yamamo's house," Cammy said, causing Momo to groan. "Why my home?" "'Cause it's huge, so we can all have our rooms, right?" "Well, I mean. Yes," Momo said as her cheeks warmed. "We do have several guest rooms." The two blondes laughed as their friend blushed and tried to change the subject from her family's obnoxiously large house. Ainen took a deep breath as she entered the teacher's lounge and was finally able to pull her helmet off. She'd been working at UA for a few years now, but it was still hard to get used to dealing with so many kids at once. "Rough class?" Ainen tensed as that sweet voice washed over. Her eyes scanned the lounge and spotted Namiri on one of the couches with a glass of water on the table in front of her. Ainen's heart started to pick up as she gave a shaky smile. Just a bit. First years are a little eager, and it causes problems." Namiri snorted and laughed as she nodded. "Very true. Did you have Aizawa's class or Vlad's?" "Aizawa," Ainen said as she sat on the couch across from Namiri and placed her helmet on the table. "He's only got 10 students left." "Impressive," Namiri muttered. "Last year, he had 1. I didn't think you were serious when you said he kicks students to Gen Ed if he doesn't think they can cut it. Namiri shrugged and took a sip of her water before saying. He's got his reasons. He's mainly just looking out for the kids and making sure they take this seriously. Our job is pretty dangerous, after all. Yeah. I'm glad I took this job. Even with all the eager students? Ainen chuckled and gave a firm nod. Yes, even with how eager the first years get. The USJ came out better than I could have imagined, and the students are learning how to excel at rescue work. Hopefully, this will keep disaster zones from stalling out like they did back then. Hopefully, Namiri said as she eyed Ainen. The younger woman was not exactly what Namiri had been expecting. When they met, and in subsequent interactions, Namiri had assumed Ainen was an anxious person who was nervous around others she didn't know well. Namiri had assumed the persona of 13 was meant to help Ainen manage the stress of being in the public eye, and while she was sure that was the case, it was to a lesser extent than she'd assumed. It also helped to keep her kids safe. All of Namiri's assumptions had been proven wrong for the most part once Ainen started to work at UA. Ainen wasn't a social butterfly, but she got along with everyone at work and managed social situations well. She was a fairly confident and reliable woman who was only ever nervous around Namiri. At first, Namiri thought maybe Ainen was just uncomfortable around the persona of Midnight, but she'd seen some of Ainen's modeling shots. The woman wasn't afraid to show some skin and had done a few shots that people would consider SNSL. Taking everything into account, Namiri came to a single conclusion. Ainen Kuros had a crush on her. She wasn't sure if it was on Namiri as a person or on the persona of Midnight. Namiri smiled as she listened to Ainen start to go over her day so far. She was not one to sit on something and see how it played out. Namiri was a woman of action, especially when she fancied someone. It had burned her more than a few times, but she had a good feeling about this. I just hope Aizawa doesn't punish them too hard. It was an honest mistake, and frankly, it was better for them to make it during class rather than out in the field. Ainen finished with a sigh before realizing Nemur was staring. I'm sorry I rambled. That's my bad. I'm sure you didn't want to sit here and listen to me ramble. Oh no, it's quite okay. I like listening to you talk. You have a very sweet voice. Namiri said as she crossed her legs and leaned forward. I'd like to hear you talk some more. Ainen felt her neck heating up as she watched Namiri sigh dramatically. But I need to get back to work soon. What should I do? Ainen racked her brain for anything. Just as she was about to give up hope, a conversation with Mamiko came to mind. There's a cafe that opened up a few blocks from my place. I've heard it was pretty good. We could, go there and talk over some coffee or something. Namiri smiled, and Ainen felt a shiver run down her spine as the older woman practically purred. Oh? Are you asking your senpai out on a date? And at work, no less. I'm impressed by how bold you're being, Kuros. Ainen gulped and pulled together all her courage as she nodded. Why yes, I am. Frankly, I've always had a bit of a crush on Midnight, and getting to know Kayama has only made it grow. I think you're a wonderful woman, and I'd like to get to know you better. Namiri straightened up as her ears warmed. She hadn't expected such a passionate declaration from Ainen. Her heart raced as she smiled and said, Well, how could I possibly deny such a passionate declaration? I've been wanting to get to know you better as well, Kurso, so how about you text me the details later, and we call it a date? Ainen nodded as her confidence started to decline rapidly. Sure. That sounds good. Really good. Namiri giggled, and the sound was the most pleasant thing Ainen had ever heard. Well, I'll be looking forward to it. Until then, make sure to keep teaching those young, eager students. Ainen nodded as her voice failed her, and she watched Namiri walk away. Ainen had trouble looking away from Namiri's hips as she put a little more sway to them than usual. Once she was alone, Ainen slumped onto the couch and screamed into the cushion before pulling her phone. She needed Mamiko's help, and she needed it soon. Ainen stood at the station and tried not to check her phone. Her nerves tingled as she tried not to think about how long it had been since she went on a date. She was dressed in a black and white vertical striped button-up shirt and a pair of khaki slacks. The first few buttons of her shirt were undone, and her mind kept bouncing back and forth on whether that was a good idea or not. Mamiko insisted on it, and Ainen was too nervous back then to argue. Now it felt like she was rapidly running out of time to change her mind. Hey, I hope you didn't wait long, Namiri said as she approached. Ainen looked up and felt her mouth dry up instantly. Namiri was dressed in a long cream-colored skirt and a slightly oversized black long-sleeve shirt. Her hair was pulled up into a bun, and she wore a pair of triangular red glasses. In Ainen's opinion, she looked very pretty. No, I just got here. You look really nice. Namiri smiled and looped her arm around Ainen's. Thank you. I have to say you look quite nice as well. I like your shirt. Ainin blushed as Namuri's eyes very clearly went to her undone buttons. Thank you. Namuri giggled and started to pull Ainin along. You're welcome now, come on, take me to the cafe. Yeah, of course. It's right this way. Ainin said as she took the lead. A few minutes later, the two found themselves sitting at a small table in a quiet cafe. Cups of coffee and a couple slices of cake were set between them. Namuri was impressed by how good the cake and coffee were, but she hadn't partaken much. She expected to enjoy her time with Ainin, but she wasn't expecting the younger woman to pull her in so easily. How are you kids doing? Staying out of trouble? Namuri asked. Izuku is doing great. Himiko's starting to be a bit more rebellious, but Mamiko is handling it well. Honestly, we're both just glad that they're making friends at school. Namuri chuckled and took a sip of her coffee before saying. I was a little surprised when I heard you and Uwabami weren't together. Raising kids together isn't usually something just friends do. Ainin sighed as she poked at her cake. I realized that, but honestly, Mamiko has always been like a sister to me. Even after I moved away for a few years and then we reconnected, it didn't feel like anything changed. Though after high school, I did learn I can't stand living with her. Oh? Namuri said as she leaned forward. How bad was it? Ainin rubbed her eyes. I can't even get started. By the end of it, I may have tried to smother her with a pillow. If you ask her, I'm pretty sure she'll say the same thing. We realized we were better off living separately. Luckily we ended up with apartments that are a few doors down from each other. Namuri chuckled as she covered her mouth, and Ainin told a few more stories about Izuku and Himiko. After some time, the two left the cafe, and Ainin was a little confused as they walked in the opposite direction of the station. As Namuri looped their arms together and pulled Ainin along, she asked. Where are we going? Oh, I hope you don't mind, but there's a park nearby I want to check out. Do you mind accompanying me? Not at all, Ainin said as she leaned closer to Namuri. Any reason to spend more time with you is a good thing. Namuri's cheeks flushed as she smiled. Good answer. Now come along. The Kuroshibata family dinner was full of the usual chatter. Himiko picked at her food, and as she opened her mouth to speak, Mamiko spoke up. You okay, Himi? Is Ainin's cooking that bad? The blonde woman grunted as Ainin punched her arm. I cook better than you. Himiko chuckled and set her chopsticks down. No, it's good. Well, I wanted to tell you all something. Oh? Got some big news to share? Mamiko asked as she smiled. I don't want to go into heroics. Himiko blurted as she shut her eyes tight. Her friends had told her it would be okay, but still, her family lived and breathed heroics. Both her parents were active pros, and her little brother wanted to be one. How could they not be at least a little disappointed in her? Okay. Any idea what you want to do? Himiko looked up at Maiko, who was giving her a reassuring smile. Himiko looked around the table and saw that Ainin was doing the same, while Izuku looked at her curiously. I don't know. Himiko said as she started to fiddle with her chopsticks. I'm not sure what I want to do, I just know I don't want to be a hero. I'm sorry. You don't have anything to be sorry for, Ainin said as she set down her chopsticks. You've still got plenty of time to decide on what you want to do, so be sure to give it plenty of thought. Himiko looked at her guardians before looking back at Izuku, who smiled. I'm sure you'll be great at whatever you decide to do, Himi. Himiko chuckled and picked up her chopsticks again as she realized how silly she had been for worrying. Thanks. I'll do my best to figure out what I want to do. Izuku hummed as he and his older sister walked around the mall. Christmas was around the corner, and the siblings were on the hunt for gifts to give their friends. Himiko glanced at him for a moment before asking. Something on your mind, Izu? I've just been thinking. About our past day and the stuff that's changed since then, Izuku muttered. Himiko reached out and grabbed Izuku's hand as she asked. You okay? Are you having nightmares or something? Izuku shook his head as he squeezed his sister's hand. No, just thinking about what's changed and how. Maybe Kami and Momo could know. Himiko tensed as she glanced around. Nothing had happened after the day they were saved, but neither had ever taken the risk of revealing anything. It got easier as the years went on, and while Himiko remembered her original name, she hadn't heard it said aloud in years. I don't think we can make that decision. Mom and Ainin said we were supposed to keep it a secret forever. Yeah, but I don't know, it just feels weird constantly knowing that I can't tell my best friend everything about myself. Do you not feel that way too? She did. Every so often, when she was spending time with her two closest friends, she would think about how much of herself she kept hidden from them. Why yeah, but we can't just tell them. I know. I just didn't want to bring it up with Mom and Mamiko by myself. Izuku muttered as he looked away from his sister. Himiko squeezed his hand again and bumped her shoulder against his lightly, as she said, "Let's talk to them when we get home. I'm sure they'll understand. Besides, they both like Momo and Kami a lot, so they'll probably agree." Izuku nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure they will." As the siblings walked, Izuku asked, "What are you getting, Momo? I need to make sure I get something better for her than you." "Huh?" Himiko looked at her brother, who had a determined look in his eyes. "Why do you need to get something better? Wait, don't tell me, are you Dash?" "No." Izuku snapped. "I know what you're gonna say, and no, I'm not interested in Momo like that. It's just that she's my best friend, and yet she seems to be spending more time with you and Kami than me." "Well, we're all girls, so you know we have more in common." "Still." Himiko smiled as she bumped his shoulder and said, "I'll make sure Momo knows you're feeling lonely." Izuku blushed as he stepped away from his sister. "I am not lonely." "He totally is," Hestia said as she popped out. "I am, too, by the way. I want Momo around more. She's a lot of fun." Himiko chuckled and patted Hestia's head. "I'll make sure she knows her two bestest friends want to see her more." Izuku blushed and grumbled as his quirk and sister laughed. "You want to tell them?" Ainin asked as she looked at her kids. "Are you both absolutely sure you can trust Momo and Kami?" Izuku and Himiko nodded immediately as they said, "Yes." Ainin looked at Mamiko as she asked, "What do you think? It's been years now, and the police say there's been no noise about the Kingdom of Nine trying to find the kids. It should be safe if they do it here," Mamiko said as she looked at her friend. "Kami loves gossip, but she knows how to keep a secret, especially when it comes to Himiko, since no matter how much I grilled her, she wouldn't spill where she and Momo took Himiko when she was supposed to be grounded." Himiko blushed and looked away as she muttered, "We didn't get into any trouble, so what's it matter?" Mamiko sighed and rubbed her forehead. Ainin patted her friend's shoulder and said, "Shelve that for later. As for Momo, she's a good girl despite Kami and Himiko trying to make her a troublemaker like them. As long as you two tell them how serious this is, I'm sure it'll be okay." "Thanks, Mom," Izuku said as he smiled. "We'll be sure to tell them next time they come over." "Good, now, onto something else," Mamiko said as she looked at Ainin. "Are you busy on Christmas? Midnight keeping you to herself or what?" Ainin blushed and glanced at her kids before saying, Well, we don't have solid plans yet, but you know we were thinking of." "Ugh, I hate that you got a partner before me," Mamiko grumbled. "Why can't I find a hot partner, huh? Maybe if you were more approachable and acted less like a cougar," Ainin muttered as she stirred her tea. Izuku sighed as his guardians started to bicker. While they poked at each other, he grabbed his phone and said, "I'm gonna text Momo and see if she can come over in the next couple of days." Himiko nodded as she pulled her phone out. "I'll do the same for Kami." Momo felt a bit of a flutter in her stomach. She was sitting on Himiko's bed with Kami right next to her, and Himiko herself was sitting at her desk chair. This situation was pleasant and something she was used to, but as it kept happening, she kept feeling this odd flutter of emotion. Though this time around, she could tell what the feeling was. She was nervous because Izuku was sitting near his sister, and the two of them looked very serious. "You two look totes serious. What's going on?" Kami asked as she crossed her legs. "Planning a Christmas party or something?" "We aren't, but actually, should we?" Himiko asked as she looked at her brother. "Ainin is gonna be busy, and Mom said she's gonna be working late. I think we can talk about that after Himi. I know Kami gets you distracted, but let's stay on topic right now," Izuku said as he nudged his sister. Himiko blushed as Momo and Kami chuckled. "Shut up. I'm nervous, okay?" Hestia slipped from Izuku's back and hugged Himiko from behind gently. "It's okay, Himi. Izu and I are here. Let's tell them everything, and then we can think up a super fun Christmas party." "Tell us? What do you two need to tell us?" Momo asked as she looked at her best friend. Izuku nodded and grabbed his sister's hand. "Yeah. We've told you before that Ainin and Mamiko took us in and raised us, but we've never told you the circumstances that led them to taking us in." Kami and Momo's attention fully zeroed in on them. They both knew they didn't know everything about their best friends, but they also both knew that Himiko and Izuku didn't want to talk about it. Of course, over time, they had both thought of what it could be, but they never pushed the subject. Himiko shuddered as she attempted to talk, and Izuku squeezed her hand. "It's okay, I'll talk. I know it's hard for you." Himiko nodded and accepted the handkerchief Hestia handed her. Himiko dabbed her eyes as Izuku spoke. Before our parents found us and saved us, we lived in a facility owned by the Kingdom of Nine. I was stolen from my family in America, while Himiko was taken from her parents here in Japan. They experimented on us. Ainin told us later that they were doing illegal quirk research." Kami and Momo both stared at him with increasing shock. Their bodies had gone stiff at the news. Izuku shuddered, but Hestia was on him in a second, doing her best to keep her host from breaking down. I was held and experimented on for 6 months. Hime was there for years. Both sets of eyes shot to Himiko, who was on the verge of breaking down. She nodded, confirming that he was right. Izuku took a deep breath and patted Hestia's head. During one of the experiments, Hestia manifested, and she went on a rampage. She destroyed the facility, and I lost my arm in the process. Izuku smiled as his quirk touched his stump. It's okay, Hestia. You did the best you could. You had just formed, and you were scared. I don't blame you. Hestia nodded quietly, and after letting her host pat her head, she returned to Himiko. After we got out, the other kids ran, and Himiko and I were found by Anan and Mamiko. They took us in, and we went into protective custody where they guarded us until eventually adopting us. They guarded you? Momo asked. Does that mean? Is Ms. Kuro's a hero? Izuku nodded. Yeah, and she doesn't like people knowing, so don't tell her I told you, but she's 13. Wow, I was right, 13 is hot under that helmet, Kami muttered, making Himiko cringe. Cam, don't say my guardian is hot like that. It's super gross. No regrets, Kami said as she shrugged. Izuku chuckled weakly before taking a deep breath and saying, I like my name. Izuku Midoriya is who I am, but back then, before they saved us, my name was Mikumo Akatani. Himiko sniffed as she sat up a bit and said, I am Himiko Toga, but back then, my name was Tori Yukio. We trust you too. You're our best friends, and we wanted you to know the truth. Can we hug you too? Kami asked. 'Cause you two look like you need it. Momo nodded as she looked at Izuku and Himiko. She's right, you really do. Izuku nodded, and Himiko said, please. The 4 young teens embraced in a tight hug, with Hestia wrapping herself around them. For several moments they stayed like that before separating. As they sat around the floor of Himiko's room, Momo asked. So about that Christmas party idea. Do we need anything else? Momo asked as she checked the bags she was carrying. I think we got everything, Izuku said as he checked the list. Hime and Kami are getting the food, so we should head back and start decorating. Momo nodded, and the 2 teens started the trip home. As they walked, Momo smiled a bit as she said. So Himiko told me that you and Hestia were lonely. Izuku blushed and looked away as he huffed. Momo chuckled and bumped her shoulder against his as she said. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ignore you. You're my best friend and sure we see each other at school a lot but still. I'll do my best from now on to not ignore you. Thanks, Izuku muttered. Sorry for being weird about this. You're not being weird, Momo stated. I think it's fine to get lonely when your friends aren't around. Izuku sighed, and his shoulders slumped. Guess you're right. As the two walked, their conversation drifted on, and eventually, Momo said. I think cram school would be a good idea once we start our 2nd year. Huh? That sounds like a lot of extra work. Why would we do that? Izuku asked as he looked at his friend. Because UA is a difficult place to get into, and I think we could use the extra help. I'm sure you don't want to just get into UA. You want to excel at UA, don't you? Yeah, I do, Izuku muttered. He hadn't been that competitive about grades until his friendship with Momo. The girl consistently outperformed him and would brag about it. It stoked his competitive side, and now he was determined to beat her one of these days. Then let us go to cram school for the next 2 years and be the best of the best at UA. You can be the 2nd best academic student. Izuku clicked his tongue as he glared at her. Oi, I'm gonna beat you one of these days. When we're in UA, you'll definitely be the 2nd best. Momo puffed up with pride as she said. I think you said something similar during finals. Where did you place again? Izuku huffed and sped up. Can't believe I bought you such a nice present. Maybe I should give it to Kami. Huh? You got me a gift? Momo said as she sped up to catch up to him. I have a present for you too, but I left it at home. After dropping this stuff off at your house, I'll have to go get it. Izuku looked over curiously as he asked. What did you get me? Momo raised an eyebrow as she looked at him. I'm not telling you. You have to wait. Ugh, fine. Izuku stumbled a bit as Hestia suddenly popped out. What about me? Did you get me something? Yes, I did, Momo said as she patted the flaming visage of Hestia. She was always surprised by how much she looked like Izuku. I think you'll like it a lot. Both of you. Hestia cheered while Izuku tried to rein his quirk in. People were starting to stare, and he really didn't want to get in trouble for having his quirk out and about in public. Alright, let's get this Christmas party started, Kami said as she burst into the apartment. Momo squeaked as she nearly dropped the decorations she was holding. See Kami, please do not just burst in like that. Ha ha ha, I'm sorry, Momo. Forgive me. Cammy said as she glomped onto the dark-haired girl. I'm just so excited. And me too, Momo muttered as she handed off the decorations to Izuku, who rolled his eyes and set up the last of them. Once Himiko showed up, the 4 teens chatted as they worked on the food. Once it was ready, they sat and ate as Cammy pulled out a stack of board games. I borrowed these from my older brother since he's at college. Nice, now our friendship can crumble away before the new year, Himiko said as she looked at the assembled games. Momo raised an eyebrow at Izuku, who sighed and said, she's still upset about our last family game night. I will stop calling her mom if she pulls that crap again, Himiko muttered. Cammy chuckled and gave Himiko a side hug. It's okay, Himi, our friendship is stronger than Monopoly. Well, see about that, Himiko said as she grabbed some more veggies. What are we gonna play first? Can't believe I spent money on you too. Both of your traitors and, to make it worse, one is my own brother. Himiko grumbled as she went bankrupt and leaned on Momo. If you beat them, I'll give you both of their presents. I will do my best, Momo said quickly. The warmth coming off Himiko was very inviting, and her pouty face looked so cute. Momo looked over the board as she started to plot. She had only planned to play and have fun, but now it was different. I can't believe I lost, Momo muttered as she sulked with Himiko. Izuku chuckled as he and Cammy put the game away. You got greedy, Momo. If you'd kept playing like you had before, you might have won. Poor Momo, Cammy said as she patted the dark-haired girl's head. How about gift exchanges to help cheer you up? Momo nodded as she reached for her bag. I do have something for all of you. Samesies, Cammy said as she hopped to her feet. Let's start the exchange, gals, and pal. Momo went first as she pulled several small packages out of her bag. I did my best to hold back. There were a lot of things I wanted to get you, but I controlled myself. Her friends all chuckled as she blushed. They knew their rich friend had a tendency to forget how much money was considered a lot by people not in her tax bracket. Momo cleared her throat and handed the bags to each of them. Himiko and Cammy both pulled out several bottles of nail polish and a couple shades of lipstick, all of which were brands that the two had spoken at length about with Momo. Izuku pulled out a book that made Hestia squeal with joy. The quirk thanked Momo repeatedly before talking about how much she had been wanting to read it. Izuku smiled as he watched his quirk dance in place happily. After he pulled his gift out, he tilted his head. A pocket watch? Momo nodded as her cheeks turned red. I wasn't sure what to get you. It didn't seem like you needed anything, and you hadn't been talking about anything recently, so I figured this would be good. It will add a bit of flair to any formal wear you have to put on. Izuku chuckled as he popped the watch open. Thanks, Momo, it's nice. I'll be sure to take care of it. Momo preened under the praise from her friends. Himiko pulled her gifts out next, giving Cammy and Momo scarves. Himiko blushed as she told them how they matched the one she had and figured it would look good on both of them as well. As her friends thanked her, Himiko handed Hestia and Izuku their gifts. Hestia was happy to receive the latest volume of her favorite manga, while Izuku got a new dark green leather-bound journal. Himiko rubbed her neck as she said, "You take so many notes in your notebooks. I figured you could keep the really important ones in this one." Izuku smiled as he leaned over and hugged his sister. "Thanks, Himi, it's great." Cammy swiftly dropped her bags onto the table and passed them around. "Gonna be honest, fam, they're all clothes. I went a little crazy shopping one day and forgot about Christmas, so yeah. Izu, you get 2 because of Hestia." Himiko and Momo both got new tops they had tried on before, while Izuku got a black jacket and a dark red beanie. Cammy smiled as she said, "You guys are gonna look fresh as F-, so you're welcome for that." "Thanks, Cam," Himiko said as she folded up her new top. Izuku and Momo both thanked her for their gifts, and the former pulled out his. "I struggled way more than I should have with this." The girls all chuckled as Izuku passed the bags out. "Cammy, I had no idea what to get you, so Himi helped me out." "Oh, these are nice," Cammy said as she pulled out a pair of stylish winter gloves. "They match the scarf." "Thanks, Izu, I'ma wear the heck out of them." Himiko smiled as she pulled out Tokyo Street Style by Yoko Yagi. "Oh, I saw this at the bookstore a few weeks ago." "Thanks, Izuku. I'll be sure to learn lots from it." Momo pulled out a deep red leather-bound notebook. Izuku chuckled as he tapped the one he got from Himiko. "I had no idea she was getting this for me. I essentially gave it to you for the same reason Himi gave me mine." "Ah, thank you, Izuku. I will use it wisely," Momo said as she opened the journal and flipped through the crisp pages. With gifts exchanged, the 4 friends continued their Christmas celebration, and by the time Mamiko got back from work, the 4 of them were all passed out on the living room floor. The pro-hero sighed as she looked at them. "Why did I let them do this in my apartment? Ainan's not even gonna be in hers tonight." You know these classes aren't as bad as I was expecting, Izuku said as he grabbed his binder and tucked it under his arm. Hesita hummed as she rested her chin on his shoulder. I guess, but it's cutting into my reading time. Izuku chuckled as they headed for the door. I'm sorry, I promised to make it up to you. You better, Hestia says before disappearing. Izuku smiled and rounded the corner, and almost immediately ran into someone. Izuku lost his binder, and several papers slipped out. As he crouched, the girl in front of him knelt down quickly. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Let me lend you let me help you. Izuku looked up at the pale girl with long periwinkle hair and lavender eyes. She was blushing, and Izuku couldn't help but chuckle, which turned into full laughter as she looked up quickly, causing her glasses to nearly fall off. I am sorry. I appreciate the help. Izuku said as he opened his binder. I just haven't heard anyone catch themselves like that before. The girl cleared her throat and quickly gathered the scattered papers. I apologize for my choice of words. I failed to notice until after I spoke. It's okay. I promise I'm not torn up about my arm. I'm used to all of it. Izuku said as he stood up and accepted his binder. I'm Izuku Midoriya, by the way. Psycho Intelli. It is nice to meet you, and again, I apologize for running into you. I was stuck in my own head. Psycho said as she adjusted her glasses. It's alright, I understand. I get stuck in my own head all the time. Izuku adjusted the grip on his binder before moving to step around her. I gotta get going, but it was nice bumping into you. Hopefully, if we see each other again, we'll both be paying more attention. Psycho chuckled softly as she gave him a nod. Hopefully. Have a good evening, Midoriya. You too, Intelli. While Izuku had applied at the same time and tried to get the same schedule as Momo, luck wasn't on his side, and as a result, he and Momo ended up attending cram school in different classrooms. He'd worried about her but found that everyone was too busy with schoolwork to even notice or connect Momo to her family name. After his initial run-in with Psycho, Izuku suddenly found himself crossing paths with her whenever he was coming or going from cram school. At first, they exchanged simple greetings, but eventually, as Izuku sat outside waiting for Momo to wrap up, Psycho approached him. Do you mind if I sit with you? Izuku blinked and was about to ask what she said before it registered in his head, and he nodded. Sure. I'm just waiting for my friend to finish up. We ended up in different classes. That's a shame, Psycho said as she sat down. Your uniform. Is Matsubara correct? Izuku nodded. Yep. I don't recognize yours. Semi-private academy, Psycho said as she sat up with some pride. I'm the top student of the third years. Izuku whistled as he smiled. Impressive. I've heard that Semi is a tough school. I'm in second place of the second years. It is a challenge unless you apply yourself. I had assumed you were a third year. Most second years don't attend a cram school. I wasn't planning, but my friend convinced me. She said since we're trying for UA and we want to excel while we're there, we should get as much of a head start as we can. UA is quite the difficult school. Are you going for the hero course? Psycho asked as she looked at Izuku. He may have been missing an arm, but she wasn't going to assume. She had no idea what his quirk was, it could easily compensate for the lost limb. Yeah, we both are, Izuku said as something started to come out of his back. Psycho's eyes widened as a visage of the boy next to her started to emerge, but it wasn't exactly like him. It was feminine and seemed to be made of golden fire. Once her torso emerged from the space between Izuku's shoulder blades, the visage turned to her and smiled. Heya, I'm Hestia. I'm Izuku's quirk. You're the girl that ran into him, aren't you? Psycho blushed a little at the reminder of how disastrous their first meeting was. Yes, I am. You're a sentient quirk, aren't you? Hestia nodded. Yeah, I know. I'm awesome. Izuku rolled his eyes as he reached up and patted his quirk's back. She's been feeling pretty proud of the fact that a quirk like her is extremely rare. I would be proud as well, Psycho stated as she took in every detail of Hestia that she could. So little is known about sentient quirks, they're so rare it's hard to gather any data on them. Are you interested in quirks? Izuku asked as Hestia slunk down and draped her arms around his shoulders, and rested her head on the top of his. Psycho's cheeks tinged red again as she cleared her throat. Yes, I also want to be a hero, and with my quirk, I figured it would be a good idea to know as much about quirks as I could. What is your quirk? If you don't mind me asking. Izuku said as his curiosity started to prickle. His friends and family all supported his slight obsession with quirks, but no one else held the same level of desire to know. He could tell just by looking at Psycho that she was probably like him. I don't mind at all. My quirk is called tea time. When I drink tea, it increases my intelligence and helps me with specific things depending on the type of tea. That sounds so cool. Izuku muttered, Do you mind telling me some more about it? Psycho spotted the notebook he had pulled from his backpack and smiled as she slipped out a small bound notebook. Only if you'd be willing to share details of your own quirk. As I said before, there is very little information on sentient quirks. Izuku chuckled as he saw her notebook. I'd be more than willing to. Maybe we can share what quirks we've taken notes on. Before Psycho could respond, a very beautiful girl with raven dark hair walked up. Sorry, I'm late, Izuku. It's all right, Momo, Izuku said as he put his notebook away and stood. I'm sorry, Intelli. I'd like to stay, but we have to get going. That's quite all right. Actually, would you mind if I got your number? We may not have much time here to speak, but I would very much like to hear your thoughts on quirks. Why yeah, of course, Izuku said as he quickly got his phone out. I'd love to hear what you have to say about them as well. After the two had exchanged info and gone their separate ways, Momo asked. Who was that? Psycho Intelli, Izuku said as he put his phone away. I ran into her a few weeks ago, and we just kept passing each other. We were about to start talking about our quirks. It seems she likes to analyze them like me. Good thing I showed up when I did. Momo sighed. If she's anything like you when it comes to quirks, then we'd have been there for hours. Izuku scoffed and muttered. I'm not that bad. Aha, of course not, Momo said as she smiled at her friend. So, how does your quirk work? Izuku asked as he sat next to Psycho. The two were seated outside the cram school after another day of schoolwork. Momo had some family function her parents wanted her to attend, and so she had run off pretty quickly after classes were done. Izuku lamented that he still hadn't been able to properly introduce Psycho to Momo. If I want to use tea time, I have to drink tea. A standard cup of tea will give me about 2 hours worth of heightened state. Psycho said as she pulled out her small bound notebook. Different teas give varying effects. Interesting. How does it affect you? Well, green tea helps me when I'm working on big picture plans. You know, like, if I was going on vacation, I'd drink some green tea while planning out the itinerary. Black tea helps me with making analytical decisions, while white tea helps me with creative endeavors. I've also found that Chinese yellow tea helps me focus. Izuku marveled at how organized her notes were. Wow! What about herbal teas? Psycho chuckled as she said. They put me to sleep really quickly. That's interesting, Izuku muttered as he scribbled down some ideas. How'd you figure out how your quirk works? I used to have tea with my uncle when I was younger, Psycho said as she looked away. Izuku saw a bit of a frown pull at her lips before she seemed to shake the feeling off. I was doing homework one day while we were drinking tea, and suddenly, the problems were just so easy to solve. After some experimenting, I learned all I could. Now I mostly focus on honing my skills in the absence of tea. Makes sense. If your base is higher than your buffed state would be even better, and your unbuffed state wouldn't be anything to sneeze at. Izuku said as he smiled. Your quirk is so cool. Psycho chuckled and flipped to a clean page. Your quirk seems far cooler and more interesting to me, but thank you. I am pretty cool, Hestia said as she emerged from Izuku and propped her elbow on his shoulder. Is this the part where Izuku gushes about me? Izuku chuckled and nodded. Yes, this is where I talk about you. Hestia smiled and wrapped her arms around Izuku as he started talking. So while she's made of light and looks like fire, she doesn't seem to actually burn anything. Not sure if she can though I haven't really found a place or chance to test it. What do you think, Hestia? Psycho asked as she looked at the quirk. Do you think how you present yourself is just for show, or can you burn? I don't know. I've never felt hot, even when I first formed, and was a bit out of control. I didn't burn anything, so probably not. You went out of control when you first formed? Psycho asked as she jotted down notes. Izuku and Hestia tensed for a moment before Izuku nodded. Why yeah, bad dream, and she popped out one day. Tore up my room. Psycho hummed as she saw the slight nervousness in his eyes. She figured it was probably just a more embarrassing story, and so she didn't pry. Interesting. I wonder if every sentient quirk awakens like this. Who knows, Izuku said as he looked at the notes he had on himself and Hestia. There are so few of us I can't even find a book or blog post about them. Izuku showed his notes to Psycho. This is all I have on things like how far Hestia can get away from me, how long she can stay manifested, and even some of her thoughts on what it's like to be inside my body. So there doesn't seem to be a limit on how long she can be outside your body. Hestia nodded. Yeah, I just get bored and sometimes feel like being inside. Psycho read over Hestia's words in the notes and said. Based on how Hestia describes being inside you, it reminds me of times where I've woken up from a dream, but I'm still half asleep. And you keep the dream going, Izuku said as his eyes widened. And sometimes you can't tell if it's real or not. Yes, Psycho said as she smiled. This is quite interesting. It also seems that her strength is several times your own. Izuku nodded. I've been working out more to try and see if it increases hers, but I haven't had a lot of free time to increase my workouts. Hopefully, when I get into UA, I'll be able to find out more. You're very confident you'll get in. Izuku nodded again as he smiled and patted Hestia's head. I've got Hestia watching my back, so I'm pretty sure we can do anything. Heck yeah, we can. Hestia preened. Oh, right, I've been meaning to ask, what school do you want to go to? Are you gonna try for UA? Izuku asked as he looked over to Psycho. No. After a lot of research, I determined that UA wouldn't be where I needed to go. I'm planning to attend CI Academy. That's the all-girls school, right? Psycho nodded. Yes, they're an old school from before Quirks. After Quirks and Heroes became mainstream, they shifted and now have a heavy focus on teamwork among heroes. I plan to be a more strategic and investigative hero. Like Night Eye, Izuku said as he smiled. With your quirk, that would be the best way to go. Exactly. He is quite the inspiration for me. Psycho said before pulling her phone out. I should get going. My mother will worry if I don't get home soon. I understand my parents get pretty nervous when my sister and I are out late. I'll see you later, Intelli. I'll see you later, Midoriya. Have a good night. You too, Izuku said as he and Hestia waved goodbye. Ainin tensed as she felt a pair of hands wrap around her waist. She relaxed slightly as she saw Namuri resting her chin on Ainin's shoulder. Hey, you. Hey, Kayama, Ainin muttered. Namuri pouted as she batted her eyelashes. Oh, come on. You called me Namuri last night. We are at work. No one's around, Namuri said before seeing the look on her girlfriend's face. Though I suppose I should hold back for your sake. Ainin sighed as her girlfriend released her and went to sit on one of the couches in the teacher's lounge. Thanks. What's wrong? Namuri asked. Ainin frowned but stayed silent as she poured a cup of coffee. Namuri smiled as she rested an elbow on her knee and propped her head up with her hand. She'd learned pretty quickly that sometimes it was best to let Ainin come out and say what was on her mind instead of trying to push the subject. Ainin walked over and sat down across from Namuri, who just kept quiet and smiled. After sipping her tea a little, Ainin set the cup down and said, My father tried to contact me this morning. I haven't talked to him or my mom in, well, since junior high. Namuri sat up in surprise. She'd expected years but not that many years. What did you do? I didn't answer, Ainin murmured as her hands tensed around the cup. Sorry, I don't really want to talk about it. I just feel weird today. That's okay, Namuri said as she smiled. I'll give you some space today if you want. Thanks. Ainin sighed. Namuri nodded and, after a moment, asked. How are your kids? Ainin smiled a little as she thought of Himiko and Izuku. Good for the most part. Himiko is continuing to be a bit rebellious, but thankfully, it doesn't seem like she's getting involved in anything that will get her into real trouble, even with Kami's influence. I think I have Momo to thank for that. Namuri chucked as she leaned back. It seems to me those three have been getting along more and more. Ainin sighed and slumped in her seat. Yes, they are. I'm not entirely sure where it's going, but with how much they hang out and how they act, I don't know if friendship is where they'll stay. Oh, I can't wait to hear about that. How about Izuku? Has he been as rebellious as his big sister? Not really, Ainin said. He behaves himself most of the time, though he does cover for Himiko when she's sneaking out. Namuri snorted as she watched Ainin relax more. He's a good brother who cares about his big sister. I'd expect nothing less. Yeah. Oh, he made a new friend recently. I haven't met them, but I heard them talking about quirks one day. She seems to be as fascinated by quirks as he is. Ainin raised an eyebrow as Namuri's chuckle turned into full laughter. What? Sorry. It's just. Izuku has a lot of women in his life. Does he have any male friends? There are people at school he's mentioned before, and he's spent time with them, but I don't think any of the guys at his school are as close to him as Momo is. Well, at least he's getting along with people in class. Namuri checked her phone and groaned. Great, the next PRD is gonna start soon. Best get back to work then, Ainin said as she picked up her tea. I still have a few hours till I need to get back to the USJ. Lucky, Namuri muttered as she stood and stretched. She enjoyed the feeling of her girlfriend's eyes on her. Namuri moved for the door but stopped as Ainin spoke up. Namuri. Thank you for understanding and for talking to me. I feel a bit better now. Namuri turned and winked playfully as she said. Don't sweat it, sweetie. I'll always be there to make you feel good in any way you want me to. Ainin blushed hard, and Namuri grinned before stepping out with a wave. She loved seeing her girlfriend look so embarrassed. It was so cute, and it always got her fired up. She'd be able to make it through the rest of the day now. Momo, this is Psycho and Eli. Izuku said as he motioned to his friend. The three of them were outside the cram school on the last day of lessons. It's nice to finally get a chance to officially meet you, Momo said as she smiled. Izuku talks about you a lot. Izuku felt his cheeks warming as he said. I talk about our quirk analysis and stuff. Psycho covered her mouth with the back of her head as she chuckled. I'm sorry that it took us so long to meet. It seems we both have tight schedules. Yes, it would seem so. Except for Izuku, of course, who seems to have nothing but free time on his hands. Hey! Izuku said as he crossed his arms. It's not my fault I manage my time better than anyone else. It doesn't hurt that Hestia helps him out, Psycho said as she smirked at the boy whom she'd become good friends with. She only helps with my chores if I pay her, Izuku muttered as he rubbed his forehead. The two girls laughed, and Izuku smiled as he watched his best friend and his newest friend chat and start to get along. Though he wished it could have happened sooner. I heard you'll be taking the entrance exam for CI in a couple of weeks, Momo stated, causing Psycho to nod. Yes, I will. Once I pass, as I understand it, there will be a 2-day event where you get to know the other hero course students and form teams. Psycho explained as she adjusted her light blue-rimmed glasses. You sound confident, Izuku said as he smiled. How are you so sure you'll get in? Because I am me, Psycho stated as she puffed out her chest. I'm the best student in my school, and on national mock exams, I score in the top 2%. That, along with my workout routine, has me as prepared as possible. Izuku chuckled before saying. Well, once you get in, tell me what your schedule is like so we can keep working on our quirk analysis. Of course. It would be foolish to stop our conversations just because we won't see each other as often. I expect you to show me the same courtesy once you and Yaoyorozu are attending UA. Izuku nodded. I'll do my best. Don't worry, Intelli, I'll make sure he makes time for you, Hestia said as she formed and wrapped around the older girl. It's not gonna be as fun without you around. Psycho chuckled as she patted Hestia's head. I will miss you as well. Shall I set aside some time to talk with you? I'll just steal some of Izuku's time. He won't mind. Yes, of course, I won't. Izuku drawled as he pulled on his quirk. Hestia pouted and refused to unravel herself from around Psycho. The students sat around for as long as they could and talked until Psycho had to go home. As Izuku and Momo walked toward his house, Izuku noticed a somewhat smug smile on her face. What are you smiling about? Nothing, Momo stated as she chuckled quietly. It's just that I can't wait to tell Himiko and Kami about your crush on Intelli. Ha! Izuku yelped as he nearly tripped. What? I don't know what you're talking about. It's quite alright. I can see why you would like her. She's quite beautiful and intelligent, she loves quirk analysis, and you do have a thing for girls who wear glasses. I do not have a thing for glasses, Izuku muttered. Izuku, who's your favorite character in Violet Eyes? Just because Anri wears glasses doesn't mean that's my thing. Her story arc is beautifully written and dash. Don't try to deny it, Izu, Hestia said as she appeared from his stomach. We could go on for a while listing off the characters you like, and almost every one of them would have glasses. Those that don't wear glasses are commonly head kanoni to have glasses by fans, Momo added as Izuku's face started to flush. This is bullying, Izuku said as he tried not to look at Hestia or Momo so they wouldn't see his embarrassment. Hestia chuckled and hugged Izuku. Come on, it's fine. Besides, if you want, you can just fire back at Momo about how she feels about Himi and Kami. What? What? I don't know what you're talking about. Momo stammered out as Izuku smiled. Oh, right. I hadn't thought of that. Izuku said as he looked at his best friend. So about my sister and Kami. Momo pouted as she muttered. I can't believe this betrayal. Izuku chuckled as Hestia blew a raspberry and retreated back into Izuku. It's okay, Momo. I'm surprised you're crushing on both of them, though. Momo's ears were bright red as she reached up and ran a hand through her hair. Well, they're just really great to be around, and it just doesn't feel complete without both of them. Izuku smiled wider as they got to his apartment complex. Interesting. Well, I wish you luck with that. I'm sure it'll be difficult dealing with a crush. Not that I would know about that. Izuku, Momo said, stopping her friend. Don't deny it. Just accept you like Intelli. Izuku held her eyes for a moment before slumping over and mumbling. She's going to an all-girls school that's nowhere near UA. If it makes you feel better, Kami said she's gonna try for Shinketsu, so Himiko and I are a little bummed. Oh right, Himi's going for Gen Ed at UA, isn't she? Izuku questioned as he opened the door, and the two entered. Yes, hopefully, it goes well for her, Momo stated. Now, let's get these hero costumes designed. You guys designed your hero costumes? Himiko asked as she sat around with Izuku and Momo. They were all in Mamiko's apartment waiting for news from Kami, who was at Shinketsu taking the entrance exam. Yeah, you and Mamiko have been talking about hero costumes, right? Izuku asked as he pulled out his notebook, and Momo did the same. So we figured we'd ask you to look them over and tell us what you think. I guess I can. It'll be cool to see what you two came up with. Himiko said as she accepted her brother's notebook, which was opened up to the page with the sketch of his hero costume. Oh, this is pretty good, Himiko muttered. There's a couple of changes I'd suggest. Coloring and stuff, you know. Here you go, Izuku said as he handed over a pen. Jot M down in the margins. Himiko scribbled a few notes down before handing the notebook back to her brother. Alright, Momo, let's see what you got. Momo blushed slightly as she handed over her notebook. I went through several iterations before coming to this. I think it'll be the best option for me. I think we can do better, Izuku muttered as he moved so he could look at the design. Himiko hummed as she looked down. It wasn't often Momo and Izuku weren't in agreement. The moment she laid her eyes on the costume, she could see why. Where are the older versions? Previous pages, Izuku said as Himiko flipped through them and frowned. Momo. Listen, I need exposed skin, and while I don't totally love this design, it does give me the most space to work with, Momo said as her blush deepened. She'd gotten used to showing a bit of skin off, thanks to Himiko and Kami, but the costume was pushing past her boundaries. We can rework this and possibly add more surface area for your quirk, Himiko said as a smile slowly spread across her face. I've got some ideas. Momo sighed as her head slumped. Please help me. I've realized I'm not very good at designing things like this. That's okay. Momo, we'll make something awesome. Izuku, get some tea, and let's get started. Izuku chuckled and went to retrieve snacks and tea while Himiko and Momo sat in the living room and started to plan out Momo's costume. I passed. Kami shouted as she practically busted into Mamiko's apartment. Himiko and Momo both jumped, and Himiko dropped her letter from UA. My girls. I did it. Momo and Himiko both blushed as Kami practically threw herself at them and hugged them tightly. Himiko chuckled nervously as she recovered quicker than Momo. We're happy to hear that, Kami, but can you let go so we can see if I got into UA? Oh, FO show, my girl. My bad. Kami said as she released the two before climbing over the couch and practically falling into Momo's lap. Hey, Momo. How you doing? Good, Momo said quickly as she wondered where to put her hands. Himiko smiled and rolled her eyes quickly. Cam, get off her. Why? Momo is a good pillow, and she doesn't mind, right? Kami asked as she wrapped her arms around Momo. Nope, don't mind. It's fine. Momo's ears were burning as a blush spread across her face. Himiko sighed, and Momo tensed as the blonde leaned on her and started to open the letter. Kami stretched her legs out so they rested on Himiko's lap. Oh, I hope you got in, girl. You worked hard for this. Himiko's voice faded as she read the letter. I got in. Yay! Kami cheered as she shifted around so she was on Himiko's lap crushing the girl in a hug. Good job, Himi. Congratulations, Himiko. Momo said as she smiled and shifted over so she was closer to Himiko. You did well. Himiko smiled wide as her cheeks burned. Her best friends and the girls she loved were so close, and now she was going to go to the best school. Yeah, I did. Thank both of you for all your help. It was no problem, girl. Let's go celebrate. Kami said as she leaned back and nearly fell off the others' laps. What should we do? Momo asked as she grabbed Kami's legs to keep her from falling. Whatever Himi wants, of course. Kami grinned at Himiko, who cleared her throat. Okay, come on, let's go, Himiko said as she started to push on Kami. Get off. Kami giggled as she scrambled off her besties. They were so cute when they got flustered. She'd have to make sure to see them as much as possible, even after starting school. Can I talk to you about something serious? Ainen said, catching Namiri off guard. Namiri looked down at the shorter woman who was snuggled up against her side as they lay in bed. It was late, and she had been on the verge of drifting off to sleep, but the tone of her girlfriend's voice caused her to wake up fully. What's wrong? Was it something I did tonight? Maybe I took it too far with the dirty talk. And no, Ainen muttered as she buried her face in Namiri's shoulder in an attempt to hide her blush. That isn't what's bothering me. Okay, Namiri whispered as she sat up and tried to get Ainen to do the same. Ainen shuffled up a bit but kept her head resting on Namiri's shoulder. As she slowly played with Namiri's long fingers, Ainen took a deep breath and muttered. When I was a kid, and my quirk came, there was an accident. Namiri shifted and wrapped her arm around Ainen, trying to give her as much comfort as she could. Ainan's breath shuddered as she said, "My dad got hurt. Really badly. He used to be an artist, and after I hurt him, he couldn't work anymore." Ainan closed her eyes as tears swelled up and slipped down her cheeks. "And my mom was terrified of me, and so when I started junior high, I went to live with my aunt. It was cold, and she acted like I was made of glass. Every year that went by, I grew more distant from my family, and now my dad has tried to get in touch with me a few times now, but I'm scared." Ainan trembled as she buried her face in Namuri's chest. I don't know what to do." Namuri wrapped her arms around Ainan and pulled her closer. "Shoo, it'll be okay. Maybe your father just wants to reconnect, but if you're not ready to do that, then you don't have to. I'll be here to help you out however you want." Ainan didn't respond verbally, she simply hugged Namuri tighter, and the two stayed like that for some time until she calmed down. As Ainan pulled away, she whipped her eyes and muttered, "Sorry I cried on you." It's not the first time you've gotten me this wet," Namuri said as she shrugged. Ainan's face turned crimson as she sputtered and smacked Namuri's arm. Nemur chuckled and kissed her lover's cheek before saying, "Come on, let's take a late-night bath, and then we can try to get some sleep." Ainan nodded, and as the two got up and moved to Namuri's bathroom, Ainan said, "I don't think I'm ready to talk to my father again." Namuri smiled and took her hand gently. "That's okay. Now come on, I'm getting cold standing around here naked." Ainan nodded and let her lover pull her along. She hadn't ever thought she'd actually end up dating the woman she had a crush on, but she was glad she did. Saiko's eyes scanned the large auditorium. It was the first day of team selections for CI Academy. The first-year teachers stood around the edges of the room, watching over the students as they milled about and started to get to know each other and attempt to secure teammates for the coming years. Teams had to be made up of 10 members and would live and work together throughout the year. It had been half an hour since the event started, so Saiko was beginning to wonder if she needed to look further into what CI Academy was like. She had talked to a few others and learned that most of the students here were legacies, their families having attended the school for several generations. A majority of those who weren't legacies of the school were from hero families. Then there was the small minority of students like herself who were from neither of those groups and found them to be insufferable. Saiko sighed and looked at the groups that were forming. Unlike some of the larger hero schools, CI Academy didn't have any courses other than the hero course. Everyone here was going to be interacting a lot over the next year. Saiko needed to be sure of who she chose. Though the dejected looks and worried glances of those spurned by the others were weighing on her. Saiko took a deep breath and let it out slowly as she grabbed the small thermos she'd brought with her. It was a mix of white and yellow tea. Honestly, it tasted kind of gross and went against all her sensibilities when it came to drinking tea, but the benefit of creative thinking and increased focus outweighed it. Though she could imagine her uncle recoiling in disgust if he ever heard about this. Saiko's brain tingled as she looked at the girls who weren't chatting. The ones who were skirting the edges. The outliers who were being shunned by the others. Some of them were drifting towards each other, anxious to find some saving grace. Others were stagnating, and that was where Saiko decided to start her plan. Her uncle had told her time and time again when they used to spend time together that the outliers were the ones who were going to make history. He was an eccentric man, but she respected him despite everything. Asato Gen took several deep breaths as she tried to keep her stomach from churning. Her hands fidgeted, and she tried not to play with the double knots of her pink hair. She'd chosen CI Academy due to it being team-oriented and close to home, making it easier to visit her parents during break. She hadn't expected the girls of CI to be so intimidating. "Excuse me, miss." Asato swallowed as her nerves started to tingle with nervous energy. A tall girl with blue-rimmed glasses and long periwinkle hair stood before her, staring down at her. Yes? Can I help you?" Saiko nodded. "Saiko ain't Eli. I'm wondering if you're part of a team yet." "And no, I'm not." "No one seems interested," Asato muttered as she tried not to look at the girl's figure. Saiko was tall and was developing curves, while Asato was short and pudgy. She hated how she looked, and almost every girl here seemed to just look so much better than her. "I'm interested," Saiko stated as she placed a hand on her chest. "My quirk is tea time. Drinking tea increases my intelligence. I'd like to know what yours is and if you'd be interested in joining me." My quirk is hologram. I can mark walls and things and then project a hologram from my eyes of the area surrounding where I marked. I can have several marks out at once." Asato swallowed a lump of nervous energy and said, "I am not the best at physical stuff." "That's quite all right," Saiko said as she adjusted her glasses. They were a new pair, and it seemed she would need to get them adjusted. "With my planning, we'll make optimal use of your quirk as for the physical aspect we are at school. I'm sure they will do their best to make sure you're prepared, and as a member of the same team, I'll do my best as well to make sure you're the best you that you can be. Asato looked up at Saiko with shock on her face. Really? Most of the girls here haven't been interested in having me join them. They're fools then. A quirk that gives you security cameras that can't be taken down is quite useful. So what do you say, Ms. Jen, will you join me? Asato nodded quickly as she clenched her fist. Saiko seemed like a kind person, and she was so confident in herself. I'd like to join you. Saiko smiled and gave a firm nod. Good. Now, let's go find our teammates. Saiko watched as several girls looked at someone in disgust before muttering to themselves and moving on. Asato looked distressed as they moved towards the girl, so Saiko asked. What's wrong? Do you know her? No, I don't, but I've heard about her. Her family name is Hasaki. Saiko stilled as she looked at the yellow-haired girl who was doing her best to clean her glasses and pretend she wasn't affected by whatever the girls had said. Hasaki? Is she part of the same family as Karuka Hasaki, one of the Kingdom of Nine's leaders? Asato nodded frantically. Yes, based on what I've heard today and during the entrance exams, she's related. I'm not sure how, though. Saiko stared at the girl who slid her glasses back on and stared hard at the floor. Her heart ached at the look on her face. It was so familiar, and as she moved forward, she didn't even hear Asato's startled squeak and questions about if they were going to talk to her. Aoi Hasaki clenched her jaw as more people came by. What was the point of harassing her? She wasn't like her cousin. She had nothing to do with that villain, so why were they all treating her like she was just as bad? Aoi clenched her fist as her frustration started to bubble up. She just wanted to be a hero. Let me speak to her alone. Aoi glanced up as a pretty girl with blue glasses told her friend to stay back before approaching her. Probably just another person coming to question why she was here. They'd probably hurl some insults before moving on. Hello there, I'm Saiko and Eli. I was hoping to speak to you for a moment about the teams. Aoi blinked in surprise at the professional tone. Excuse me? Saiko adjusted her glasses as she said. I'd like to have you join my team, miss. Aoi Hasaki. My name is Aoi Hasaki. Wonderful to meet you. Would you be interested in joining my team? With my intelligence-boosting quirk and communication skills, I'm sure we can find a path to victory in any situation. Hold on, Aoi said as she put her hand up. Why are you offering? Do you not know who I am? You're Aoi Hasaki, a CI Academy student who wishes to be a hero. I don't see the issue. Aoi opened and closed her mouth several times before blurting out. You do know Slice is my cousin, right? I am related to her. Saiko stepped closer and lowered her voice as she said. I understand what you've been through. My uncle is gentle criminal. I've managed to keep it mostly secret since our last names are different, but people in elementary school and at my first junior high knew. Aoi stared at her in disbelief as Saiko sighed and said. I've kept it a secret from my friends. I'm trusting you since we can understand each other. Aoi swallowed and nodded. I understand. And thank you for trusting me, Eli. I'd be honored to join your team. Saiko smiled and gave a firm nod before turning on her heel and heading towards Asato. I'm glad to have you on board. What's your quirk, by the way? Aoi sighed as she followed after Saiko. It's the same as my cousin. All the women on my mom's side of the family have the same quirk. Are you sure about this? Asato asked as they all stood a bit away from the next girl Saiko wanted to speak to. Should you go speak to her? I will, but I would like you to go and start. It will help you to approach someone like her. Saiko said as she squeezed Asato's shoulders. I will approach shortly after and take over. Asato nodded and took several breaths before walking up. Once she was out of earshot, Aoi asked. She seems nervous. Is this a good idea? I believe so. Saiko said. She's suffering from a lack of confidence in herself. We will need to help her with that so that she can give it her all for the team. Asato smiled weakly as she approached the gray-haired girl who glared softly at him. Hello there. I'm Asato General W. Would you like to join the team I'm on? Asato shrunk back as the girl stared down at her before looking behind her. Saiko smiled as she rested a hand on Asato. Hello, I'm Saiko and Eli. I'm putting together a team and would like you to join us. The girl's hands shifted, and her arms lengthened as they turned into tentacles. My name is Suda Amiri, and I'll join you, Suda said as she shrugged. You seem pretty smart. Thank you, Amiri, Saiko said as she looked around. I see our next possible teammates. Jen, please take Amiri to join Hasaki. Asato nodded quickly and led Suda away as Saiko headed toward her next target. On the path there, she took another sip of her tea and grimaced at the taste. The two girls she was approaching didn't seem happy about being there. The blue-haired girl noticed Saiko approaching first and scoffed. Keep moving, Ms. Prissy. You're quite quick to accuse me of being prissy. Why? Psycho said as she stopped in front of the two girls. The maroon-haired girl spoke up this time. The way you carry yourself. We know what you're like. Psycho smiled as she put her hands behind her back and said, I'm not a legacy of this school, nor are my parents hero students. I'm simply a girl from a single-mother household who did her best to get into a school she thinks will give her the best chance of being a hero. Should we care? The blue-haired girl said as she tilted her head. None of that makes you special. I never said it did, Psycho said as she turned her full attention to the girl. I'm just letting you know who I am. My name is Psycho and Eli, by the way. I'm forming a team and think you two would be good fits. Though perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps you were Ms. Prissy Dash. Psycho cut off the maroon-haired girl as she said. Yes, I saw you two and expected a couple girls with some backbone who would stand up to the stuck-up girls of this school, but I see I've wasted my time. You two are simply too scared to join a team. I don't need people who lack resolve, so I'll be on my way. The hell did you say? The blue-haired girl asked as she stepped into Psycho's personal space. I said I expected better of you two, but I see I was wrong. If you two aren't team players, you should have gone to a different school. We are team players, but these beaches are so stuck up. Excuses. Psycho interrupted. Poor ones, too. Any good hero should be able to work with any other hero no matter their differences. We can cooperate, Maroon said. Then prove it and join me. We'll show all the prissy girls what real heroes are like. Psycho said as she gave each girl a hard look. The two girls exchanged a look before Maroon stepped up and said, I'm Sarah Ayako, and she's Yonezawa Rei. You plan to show up all those other girls? Psycho nodded. Under my leadership, the team will be number 1 when we graduate. Now, what quirks do you have? Claws, Sarah said as her hands turned into a dull gray and seemed to grow some kind of chitin while claws protruded from her fingers. Spikes, Yon said as several spikes poked out from her body. Psycho smiled. Interesting. Let's go meet the rest of the team, and then I'll see who else will join us. You recruiting? A brown-haired girl asked as she approached Psycho, who was on her way towards another student. Psycho stopped and nodded. Yes, I am. My name is Psycho Intelli, and you are? Fukasawa Katsumi. My quirk is aim, anything I shoot is guaranteed to hit its target. That sounds like snipe, Psycho said and noticed the look of annoyance on the girl's face. He's my dad. I'm trying to carve out my own way, so I'd prefer if you don't compare me to him. That's understandable, Psycho said as she motioned to her team. My team is over there getting to know each other. I'll be back hopefully with another member. Fuka nodded and headed toward the rest of Psycho's steadily growing team while Psycho headed for her original target. A girl with light purple hair and pale blue eyes. She looked like she was on the verge of tears as a group moved away from laughing to themselves quietly. Hello there, I'm Psycho and Eli. I was hoping we could speak. The girl flinched and straightened up as best she could while trying to appear neutral. Hello. Psycho smiled as gently as she could. I was hoping you'd be willing to join my team. The girl looked around before saying. Are you sure? Very much so. I would like to know your name and quirk, though, of course. The girl grew nervous and looked around. Psycho noted several sets of eyes on the two of them. My name is Nakai Himura. My quirk is cold touch. My hands produce freezing air. Psycho contained her surprise. A lot of people didn't know the Himura name, but she did watch the videos her uncle and his group, Harsh Truths, had made. She'd learned about the Himura family and the things they got up to. I see. Well, it's good to have you on board, Himura. I'm sure we'll become great heroes. Nakai seemed to relax some as she nodded and said. Why yeah. Thank you. It's no problem. One's family is not indicative of who a person is. I'm sure you want nothing more than to be a hero. I do. Nakai muttered as they started walking. It's all I've ever wanted. Then we shall strive for it. As the two were getting close to the rest of Psycho's team, two girls approached them, one with black hair and pointed ears while the other had dark blue hair. The black-haired girl spoke up. Hello, I'm Onaga Asaka and this is Akaji Rizu. We were wondering if you were still looking for teammates. Psycho smiled while Naki kept herself behind Psycho. Yes, we are. I'm Psycho and Eli and this is Nakai Himura. We'd love to have you on our team. I believe you would be the last two members we need. That's good, Akaji said. I was starting to worry about if we'd find a team. My quirk is blowtorch. My fingers can all expel flames. I've been practicing welding with it for a while. My quirk is hammer space, Onaga said as she put her hand on her chest. I can select a bag and give it a near limitless storage capacity while not affecting its weight. Oh, like a bag of holding, Psycho muttered, causing Onaga to perk up. Do you play D&D? Onaga asked as her eyes started to light up. I don't have experience with it, but I've read about it, Psycho said as she smiled. I am interested. Perhaps our teammates will be as well. God, I hope so, Akaji muttered. It's been a long time since the two of us were able to play. Psycho chuckled. Let us go meet the rest of the team and then get finalized. The other girls nodded and followed Psycho as she led them to her team. No one else wanted them, but she would lead them to greatness. Psycho swallowed as she stood in front of the other 9 girls. Nervous energy started to fill her as she cleared her throat. Thank you for joining me. I want you to all know that I plan to lead us to the top. We'll be the best team in CI Academy, and I'll be relying on all of your support. The others shuffled around nervously. Yon stepped up with a confident smile on her face. Sounds like a good plan, boss. I'm on board. Psycho smiled as the other girls started to agree. Once everyone was on board, Psycho adjusted her glasses and said, I'm glad we're all on the same page. Now let's go get our team registered. It was a short trip to the registration desk. The teacher waiting spoke up as Psycho and her teammates approached. Got your team put together already? Most people don't finalize until the next day. Are you all sure this is what you want? 10 affirmatives were given, and the teacher smiled as she finalized the paperwork and handed Psycho a copy. Keep those with you. One of the teachers outside will escort you to your team housing. I wish you all good luck in your coming years. Psycho and the others thanked the woman before going outside and finding a teacher to lead them to their future housing. Have you considered whether you want to take the recommended or standard exam? Ainin asked as she put the last of the dishes away and looked at her son, who was sitting at the dining table working on homework. Izuku paused as he looked up. I think I'll take the recommendation. I heard Momo got one from Best Jeanist. Ainin whistled as she said. Wow, the number 3 hero recommended her? That's gonna be a lot of pressure. I think she can handle it, Izuku stated as he tapped his pen against the paper. Are you gonna give me a recommendation? Can you, since you're a teacher and my mom? I can give you the recommendation if you're fine with that. Izuku nodded and went back to his homework. Thanks, Mom. Ainin smiled as she walked over. So about Psycho coming over tomorrow? Izuku stilled as he said. Why yeah? She's gonna help me study for the exams. Ainin smirked down at her child, who shuffled nervously in his seat. Alright, well, I hope you have a good study session. What? Izuku whispered as Ainin walked off. He hadn't been feeling nervous about Psycho coming over at all until now. His mother's words suddenly set him on edge, and the thought of being alone with the girl he was crushing on felt like a much more monumental thing than it did before. That feeling lessened considerably by the next day, but his mother's smirk still lingered in the back of Izuku's mind as he opened the door and let Psycho in. Thanks for making some time to help me out. Though, are you sure it's okay? It's fine, Izuku, Psycho said as she slipped her shoes off and followed him to the living room. My grades are fine, and my team is doing well. Nakai and Akaji are getting along again, which is a relief. Though I'm not sure why they were fighting. Fuka and Suda said it was matters of the heart, whatever they mean by that. Izuku hummed as he sat down by his notes. I'm glad they're getting along again. Psycho nodded as she took her seat and pulled her notes out. Enough about my teammates, though. How have you and Momo been? Izuku shrugged. I've been fine, though obviously I'm nervous about the UA entrance exams. I want to do good and get in. As for Momo, she's out with Himiko and Kami right now. They're at karaoke or something. I'm surprised Momo's not studying. She's usually very studious. Izuku chuckled as he opened his notebook. She was studying a lot, which is why they dragged her off to the mall. Izuku smiled as Psycho chuckled, and after a little more catching up, the two settled into their study session. With his focus on schoolwork and the looming date of UA's entrance exams, his mother's face and words were hardly on his mind. Though the moment Psycho set her pen down and stretched after going over some of his work, Izuku couldn't help but stare. Over the past year, he hadn't gotten to see her face to face much, but every time he did, it felt like she got prettier and prettier. You did pretty well on those test questions, Psycho said as Izuku shook off his stupor quickly. How about we take a break? Sounds good, Izuku grumbled as he stretched and groaned. I'm so tired. Huh? Are you not sleeping well? Hestia and I have been training a lot in preparation for the entrance exam. Mom's agency building has a room for quirk training, so she's been letting me use it. Izuku looked over after a moment and saw Psycho staring at him wide-eyed. What's wrong? Your mom's a hero? Izuku's eyes widened as he realized something crucial. He hadn't ever told Psycho about his mom's jobs nor his and Himiko's secret. They just weren't things he shared, Momo and Kami being the only ones outside the family who knew. The thought of telling Psycho hadn't crossed his mind even after he admitted to having a crush on her. Even now, it didn't seem like he should. Why yeah. Sorry, It's okay, Izuku, Psycho said as she smiled softly. I imagine they told you not to say anything for your safety. Izuku nodded. My parents are both heroes. Sorry for not telling you earlier, even though you're one of my best friends. Saiko's cheeks gained a tinge of red as she cleared her throat and quickly reined in her emotions. It's quite okay. I understand, and I don't hold anything against you. In fact, there is something I haven't told you about my family. Saiko swallowed as she fiddled with her hands. She and Aoi had bonded over the past year and had even opened up to their teammates. If they all accepted them, then Izuku would as well. My uncle is Gentle Criminal. Izuku stilled as he processed that information. Gentle Criminal was the leader of the villain group Harsh Truths. However, there was some debate online about whether or not they should be called that. The group was relatively small, but they had been causing chaos for several years now by exposing government and company secrets. Many people, from heroes to CEOs, had lost their jobs and faced legal retribution due to their activities. It must have been hard, Izuku said as he rested his arms on the table. Were you close? Saiko nodded. My uncle, who I often talked about, that's him. We used to have tea time whenever he visited my mother and me. He's an eccentric man, but I always felt safe around him, and he made me laugh. Saiko sighed as she looked down at the study work she had graded. It hurt so much when my mother told me I wouldn't get to see him anymore, and then again when I heard how people talked about him. The family of villains aren't often treated well. Were you okay? Saiko hummed as she nodded. Junior high, and now I've been fine, but back in elementary school, kids were quite fond of teasing me. Saiko smiled at the worry on Izuku's face. Her hands came together in a sudden clap, causing the boy to jump. Enough about this, though. It hardly matters now. My friends know and still support me. Right? Izuku smiled brightly as he nodded. Yeah, of course. Thanks for trusting me, Saiko. Same to you, Izuku. Izuku's smile twitched a little. He did trust her, but old habits were hard to break. How about some snacks and tea? Saiko covered her mouth as a soft giggle escaped her lips. Barley tea, if you have any, if not just water, is fine. Izuku nodded, and with some help from Hestia, he gathered what he needed and returned to his friend. By the time Saiko left for the day, Izuku felt more prepared for UA than he thought he would. His chest also felt a little lighter. It felt good to let Saiko in on some of his secrets and to have her return the gesture. The day of the recommended exams came fast, and Momo was full of nerves as she walked the path up to UA with Izuku. I'm so nervous. I thought you hung out with Kami and HIMI yesterday to keep you from being too stressed? It worked until we got to this point, Momo grumbled. I just can't help but think about all the expectations. My parents got Best Genius to give me a recommendation. I can't let them down. And you won't, Izuku said as he gave her a gentle pat on the back. We've both worked hard on this. I'm sure we'll do great, and on the off chance we fail, we'll just have to ace the standard entrance exam. Momo took a deep breath and nodded. Right. You are right. We've worked hard, I'm sure we'll do great. The duo stepped past the UA barrier and followed the signs and small robots that directed them to the testing area, where they signed in and were sent to different testing groups. Izuku guessed it made sense that they wouldn't want to put people who know each other together for any of the tests. Izuku took his seat with the rest of the people in his group and perked up as Cementos entered and started to go over the written test. He knew UA was full of heroes. His mom was one of them, but it was still amazing to just see them here being teachers. The tests were passed out, and Izuku flipped through it after the time started. It was best to get a general feel for the test before starting to answer questions. There were several pages that were fairly standard schooling things passed that were logic questions, and the last page was dedicated to a short essay on what it meant to be a hero. Izuku hummed and worked out the order in which he'd answer the questions before settling into the test. Time ticked on, and by the time the test came to an end, Izuku felt like his brain was fried. The students passed their test before following the guides to the lunchroom, where he quickly found Momo. My brain feels fried, Izuku said as he set down his tray. Same, but I believe I did well. Same here, Izuku said as he dug into his lunch. He was glad UA provided food for the test takers. What do you think the practical will be like? Momo asked as she started to pick at her food. The two bounced ideas back and forth as they ate their lunch. Eventually, Present Mike burst into the lunchroom shouting. All right, kids, follow me to the practical exam arena. Izuku frowned as he stood next to the other test takers in his group. He had not expected an obstacle course, of all things. The recommended students were all hero kids or kids who have obviously had training. He figured the test would involve some combat against robots or something. Hestia formed from his back as Present Mike announced a start to the race. Izuku was immediately blown off his feet by a gust of wind and ice as two guys shot ahead of them. Hestia shot down and broke his fall. Thanks, Hestia, Izuku said as he recovered first and sprinted after the two boys. However, it became pretty clear that there was no catching up to them. Let's go for beating everyone else, Izuku said as he hopped over a barricade, and Hestia shot ahead to pull him along faster. The two guys had already crossed the finish line and had headed inside by the time Izuku got to the end. While he'd maintained his lead on the others, it was still disappointing that those two guys had so thoroughly beaten everyone else's times. Izuku was led to a waiting room, where he sat around until Principal Nizu called his name. Izuku followed the rodent into his office and sat down as Nizu poured a cup of tea. How are you today, Mr. Midoriya? I'm doing good, sir. I feel confident about my performance on the test. Nizu hummed as he slid the tea over to Izuku. That's wonderful to hear. I have to say I was quite surprised to have one of my teachers recommend their child for the entrance exam. I don't think that's happened since I took on the role of principal. Is it that odd? Nizu chuckled. Only because most of my teachers don't have children. Being a hero and teacher takes up a lot of time, and most don't wish to add childcare on top of that. Mom does seem pretty exhausted most days, but Mamiko, Himiko, and I help out as much as we can to make sure no one is too stressed out. I'm glad to hear you have a positive home life. Now, I'd like to ask you why you wish to be a hero. Izuku sipped his tea and wondered what Saiko would think of it. He had no real knowledge of the subject, but he was pretty sure it tasted good. How much do you know about me, sir? Everything, Nizu stated. I keep myself tapped into the many goings-on in the hero world. Uwabami and 13 stumbling across a quirk testing facility and rescuing several children was something I took note of. You don't have to give details if you do not wish to, and I will not pry. Izuku took a breath and sighed. Things SCKED there. I don't want other kids to go through that, and you know with this. Izuku raised the stump of his arm. I'd like to show that maybe people like me can be a hero too. I'm sure a prosthetic was offered. Why do you not use one? Izuku shrugged as Hestia came out and draped her arms around his shoulders. I have Hestia, and I've never felt the need for one. There's not really anything too complicated to it. Nizu hummed and sipped his tea. I see. You've certainly made some interesting choices. I don't doubt you'd make a wonderful hero even if your path will be quite difficult. I'm willing to take on any challenge to achieve my dream, sir, Izuku said as he smiled. A hero's life isn't ever easy, but it's the one I want. Nizu smiled as he set his cup down. I like that answer, Mr. Midoriya, and I wish you the best of luck in passing your exams. Izuku nodded and took his leave. After being escorted to the front gate, he waited for Momo, who seemed more confident in herself than when they had first arrived. The week-long wait for the results was a harsh one. Izuku felt like he was on pins and needles every day. Eventually, his letter arrived, and he called Momo. I got my letter. Me too. Should we open them now, or do you want to come over? Should I go to you? Izuku swallowed as he stared at the letter. I don't think I can wait till we're both in the same room. Are you cool with just opening them now? Yes, I don't want to wait either. Alright then, let's do this, Izuku said as he opened his letter. A disc clattered onto his table, and a projection of Principal Nexu appeared. Well done, Mr. Izuku Midoriya. You have passed and become one of the 4 students who will attend UA as a recommended student. I was impressed by your essay, and I look forward to your future at my school. Izuku SCKED in a breath as Hestia appeared and cheered happily. I got in. Momo, I got in. Izuku's excitement died down almost immediately as silence greeted him. After a moment, Momo's voice responded, sounding strained, and Izuku felt his stomach sink. I didn't get accepted. I suppose I will have to try for the standard exam next week. Momo dash. Congratulations Izuku, Momo said, cutting her friend off. If you'll excuse me, there are some preparations I'll need to make. Izuku frowned as she hung up. Hestia squeezed her host tighter as she muttered. She's not taking it well. No, she isn't, but I know who can help her out, Izuku said as he shot off 2 text messages. They'll be able to handle this better than us. Hestia giggled as she swirled around the living room. Oh yeah, they'll do a good job. Hey, are you gonna call Saiko? Izuku's cheeks warmed as his thumb hovered over her contact. Why yeah, I am. Momo's chest felt tight as she placed her phone down on her nightstand and pulled her knees up. The edges of her vision were blurring as she tried to keep her breathing even. She'd tried so hard and put in so much work. Her parents had even used their connections to get a recommendation. She failed to meet their expectations and her own. Momo's arms trembled as she wrapped them around her legs. It hurt to fail, it hurt even more knowing that Izuku had passed. Momo tensed as a little spark of jealousy made itself known, and she quickly stamped it out. Tears threatened to spill over as she buried her face in her knees. Izuku was her best friend, and she was nothing but happy for him. She knew how hard he had worked and knew that he deserved it. Momo jumped as her phone suddenly started ringing. She wanted to ignore it, but she couldn't help but peek at who was calling. Her heart squeezed, and a choked noise escaped her lips as she saw Kami and Himiko's names in a group call. Her hand reached out slowly, and as she pulled the phone over to her, Momo attempted to pull herself together. Her finger tapped the answer button, and before she could even squeak out a hello, Kami spoke up. "I got nothing to do over the next 2 days, girls, so I'm coming down, and we'll have a sleepover at Momo's place. Are you good with that?" "Yeah, I'm good with that," Himiko said. "Should we bring anything?" "Makeup stuff, and I got a few bits of clothes I don't really want, but I think you'll both look cute in them, so if you like M, you can have M." "Sounds good. I've got some of those cookies you and Momo like, so I'll bring them along." Momo sniffled and managed to choke out. What are you two talking about?" "Sleepover prep, girl," Kami stated like they had already talked it over some time ago. But I have some things I need to do, Anne." "It's okay, Momo," Himiko said. Her voice was softer than usual, and Momo could feel her resolve crumbling. "Aizu told us what happened. Tonight and tomorrow are just gonna be the three of us having fun and relaxing. After that, Cam and I will do whatever we can to help you get ready for the general entrance exam." "Yeah, sure. Don't worry about nothing tonight, girl. Himi and I got you covered." Kami added as Momo felt her tears starting to slip down her cheeks. Momo sniffled as her body shook, and she lost hold of her emotions. All her frustration burst forth as a sob rocked her body. Himiko and Kami stayed quiet as they let their friend ride out her emotions. Once she had calmed down enough to speak, Momo listened to Kami and Himiko discuss their sleepover plans while chiming in when she could manage. She was disappointed in herself and frustrated beyond belief, but as she talked to her friends, there was a spark of warmth in her chest that grew more and more. Before she knew it, a smile was pulling at her lips.
Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed the video just leave a like, and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.